Hey friends, tonight, let's explore the quiet lessons hidden in history, the ones not found in textbooks, but in the rhythms of daily life long ago. Let's take it slow tonight. And before we go further, a gentle reminder. If tonight's story brings you a bit of stillness in a noisy world, you're welcome to like or subscribe. No expectations, just an open door when you feel like returning. Now, slip into your sandals and let's open the door to ancient Rome. You're standing in the atrium of a dormice that smells faintly of olive oil and crushed rose petals. The floor is mosaic, the light honey-colored. Someone just passed by, trailing sandal dust and the faintest trace of fig jam. But you're not a guest. You're the planner, specifically the orgy planner. It's an actual job, with scrolls, with suppliers, with scheduling nightmares that involve far more than food and seating charts. And the very first issue of the morning. Curtains. You might think the success of a decadent Roman gathering would begin with wine or performers or food that's been roasted in honey for 3 days straight. But no, if the curtains are wrong, the party is doomed before it begins. Why? Because lighting is everything. Velvet absorbs just enough sunlight to keep skin looking soft. Silk too shiny. Linen. It wrinkles quickly. And nobody wants an orgy that smells like a laundry basket. So here you are, half-dressed in your tunic, standing on a wobbly stool, adjusting the folds of a massive plum-colored curtain that's been imported all the way from Alexandria. The slave holding the ladder is yawning. You'd yawn too, except that you're concentrating too hard on the direction the light will fall at exactly noon, when the majority of guests will be reclining with grapes on their thighs and scandal in their eyes. Let's pause here for a fun side note. According to a surviving Roman housekeeping scroll, yes, those existed curtains in elite homes were swapped out seasonally. Spring floral patterns, summer sheer gauze, autumn saffron and ochre tones, winter deep velvet often dyed with crushed beetles and wine sediment. And the record notes. Curtains should be scented lightly, never strongly. They are not shields, they are suggestions. Whoever wrote that clearly had opinions. Back to your morning. Once the curtain issue is handled, you move to the cushions. This is more dangerous than it sounds, because the ratio of reclining to upright furniture at a Roman orgy is a delicate calculus. Too few cushions. You're accused of austerity. Too many. Someone inevitably sinks too deep, spills their wine, and begins a chain reaction of clumsy foot touching that could be read as either flirtation or insult. There was a case you recall where an entire senatorial guest list was blackballed because a cushion collapsed mid-toast and dumped someone into a bowl of almonds. Never again. So you adjust them with the care of a priest arranging relics. Next comes scent. You walk slowly through the triclinium, trailing a bundle of burning herbs, lavender bay, and a rare Egyptian root that smells like rain and expensive mistakes. This is not about air freshening. It's mood alignment. If guests arrive and smell fish, they think of dinner. If they smell myrrh, they think of temples. You want them to think of nothing, just that half-aware state between sleep and surprise. Like the moment before you remember a dream, you check this time, not with a clock, with shadows. The sundial outside is reliable, but you know from experience that the angle of sunlight against the statue of Diana in the garden means it's exactly 2 hours until the first guests arrive. You still have to brief the dancers. the grape feeders, the fan bearers, and the man hired to pretend he's just another guest but is secretly there to whisper compliments to anyone who looks insecure. He's expensive, but worth it. Let's dip into the academic for just a moment. Historians debate whether Roman orgies were truly as wild as we imagine. Some argue they were just exaggerated dinner parties, social theater with nudity, not debauchery. Others claim the Romans had a vocabulary of coded gestures, entire bodily languages designed to escalate or deflect attention. A finger on the rim of a goblet, interested. 2 fingers, very interested. No goblet, taken. Or too drunk to participate. There's no consensus, but one thing's clear. Someone had to plan all of it. Back to you. You smooth your hands over the last fold of velvet. You light the oil lamps in the hallway. You rehearse the sequence of music changes once the mood shifts from chatting to lounging. You double-check that the cold figs have been dusted with powdered honey and that the reclining benches don't squeak, because nothing ruins the atmosphere faster than a well-timed creak during what should be a moment of tension. Even Sir the cat that technically doesn't belong to you knows this. He's perched on a windowsill watching the silk ripple in the breeze like it's whispering secrets. He approves. The final step. You sit, not to rest, not yet, just to feel the room. You breathe in the air warm and slightly spicy. You listen to the silence. You let your fingers brush the velvet, and for a moment, you smile. Not because of the decadence, not because of the guests who will pretend to forget your name by morning, but because you made something beautiful, even if no one sees the care in the folds of the curtain or the choice of herbs burned at dawn. The curtains are perfect, the cushions are fluffed, the wine is breathing, so naturally something goes wrong. You're standing in the hallway, adjusting the wrist jewelry on a nervous dancer, when a pigeon flies in through the side atrium and lands directly on the melon sculpture, which is both rude and symbolic. The sculpture, an elaborate centerpiece carved from 2 types of melon and 1 disgruntled pomegranate, was meant to represent Dionysus, rising from the vines. Now it just looks like an annoyed bird bath. You freeze. The dancer freezes. The pigeon blinks. And in that blink, you recall a crucial fact. Pigeons were once sacred in the East, but in Rome, they were mostly considered a kitchen nuisance. You snap your fingers. A servant runs to fetch the bird broom, which is not a joke. It's a long-handled fan made of peacock feathers designed specifically to encourage air movement and discourage uninvited wildlife. Every respectable household has one. But while the broom is en route, you have another problem: scent distribution. Let's pause here for the historical. Perfume in ancient Rome wasn't just luxury, it was a language. There were perfumes for seduction, for mourning, for political gatherings, for temple visits, and yes, for orgies. Some were citrus-based and sharp. Others were musky and mellow, like the memory of smoke clinging to linen. And most shockingly, they were worn not just on the skin. Popular locations included hair, ears, ankles, behind the knees, and occasionally the soles of the feet, in case you wanted to leave behind a seductive trail while walking barefoot across a marble floor. You, being the planner, must decide on the ambient perfume, not the personal kind, the room kind. You light the incense. It's a blend of crushed sandalwood, imported cinnamon bark, and something the vendor described as dreams of spring. You didn't ask further. The scent swirls low across the marble, curling around the cushions like a cat preparing for a nap. It's working until the pigeon sneezes. Yes, they sneeze. You abandon the dancer mid-accessory, rush across the atrium, grab a fruit bowl, attempt to scoop the bird. It flaps once, dramatically scattering melon rind and powdered fig sugar onto your sandals. You sigh. You breathe in slowly, through the nose, out through the very scented mouth. This is not your first pigeon disaster. You once witnessed a dove get tangled in a harpist's sleeve mid-song and trigger a 5-person domino collapse that ended with a minor senator upside down in a wine jug. Compared to that, this manageable. The broom arrives. The servant waves it with quiet, practiced dignity. The pigeon, evidently offended, flutters back out the window. You'll need to refluff the melon, but first damage control. You grab a small amphora from the side cabinet, the emergency scent reserve. It's jasmine and almond and something that smells faintly of sunrise. You spritz it around the sculpture with just enough flair to suggest it was always part of the aesthetic. Let's break for something bizarre. There's archaeological evidence of Roman perfume boys, young men trained not just to wear, but to waft scent through parties using sleeves dipped in oils, then flapped delicately at intervals. Some had to dance with such precision that the scent hit only the faces of high-ranking guests. One record mentions a boy named Larius, who was dismissed after flapping too hard and sending a senator's wig flying into the brazier. No one was hurt, but the scent of burnt horsehair lingered for days. Back to you. With the bird handled, you return to the dressing room. The dancers are mostly ready. One is still struggling with a gold chain meant to suggest casual wealth and not, I'm tangled in the chandelier again. You help. You've done it before. You've done everything before, from restitching tunics to cutting grapes into perfect quarters to composing apology notes for guests who accidentally bit someone they weren't supposed to. And still, you do it with grace. Because an orgy is not about excess. It's about precision. Sir wanders in. He sniffs the almond scent, sneezes once, then hops into a basket of silks meant for tonight's final act. You let him stay. He's earned it. He once chased a beetle out of a senator's sandal just before the man was about to give a toast. Everyone assumed it was symbolic. No one knew the truth but you and Sir. That beetle had been in the raisins. You make one last round of the chamber. Curtains still luxurious, lighting glorious, scents balanced, birds banished. The door knock echoes softly. The first guest is here, and your job, it begins again. Because decadence is an illusion, and illusions take work. But for now, you smooth your tunic, offer your best welcoming smile, and step forward into the candlelight. You might think the success of a Roman orgy depends on the wine. But no, it depends on the grapes. Not crushed, not fermented, not aged in clay amphorae and poured dramatically into goblets. We're talking whole grapes, held gently, offered slowly, plucked delicately from vine to mouth with a certain choreography that says, I'm not just a fruit, I'm a symbol. And in your role as the planner, you are now auditioning grapes. You stand in the garden courtyard just after sunrise, arms crossed, watching two suppliers argue over texture. This one says, the first holding up a dusky purple orb has the right sheen. That one, the second, scoff squishes too easily. You want resilience. A grape must yield, not collapse. You resist the urge to sigh. You once spent an hour mediating a dispute between two fig suppliers. You're trained for this. You step forward and ask the important question: how do they feel when rolled across the stomach? Both men fall silent. Because yes, that's the test. Let's pause for a historical aside. In elite Roman society, there was an actual class of fruit servers trained in tactile awareness. They were taught not just how to present fruit, but how to gauge ripeness by fingertip pressure temperature and resistance to the soft curve of human skin. One manual, preserved on a papyrus scrap in Herculaneum, details acceptable grape sizes: smaller than a coin, too austere; larger than a thumb joint, too vulgar; translucent skins acceptable only in candlelight; with seeds only if your host wishes to encourage spitting. Yes, that was a thing. You make your choice. You select the softer grapes with a slightly matter finish, less visually dramatic, but they squish elegantly, not messily. Presentation matters. You dismiss the suppliers with a nod. The grapes are carried inside in silk-lined baskets handled by a young woman with hands so small they were once mistaken for wax sculptures. You know her name. You know everyone's name, because relationships are the real fabric of Rome. Sir appears again, this time in the shade beneath the fountain, watching a grape roll in slow circles near the rim. He bats it once. It wobbles, but doesn't fall. He approves. You take that as a sign to proceed. Inside, you brief the grape servers. They are to move among the guests silently. They are to make eye contact only upon offering the fruit. They are never under any circumstance to drop the grape on the guest. There was a scandal last month when a senator's eyebrow was stained purple from a poorly aimed conker. You still get letters. Let's dip into a strange detail. There are records of grape-specific toasts used during banquets. To the fruit of indulgence, may your pleasures ripen without rot. To skins thin and nights long. Some believe these toasts began as satire and evolved into ritual. Others argue that grapes, due to their symbolic connection to Bacchus, were used to test restraint. If you could be hand-fed grapes without losing composure, you were ready for politics. You suspect that rule no longer applies, but you keep it in mind. Back in the dining chamber, the cushions have been arranged just so. The incense is curling beautifully into geometric shapes. A dancer glides past trailing gongs. A musician tunes a lyre so softly you can't tell if it's music or memory. And the grapes, they're lined up resting in delicate bowls, cooled with rose water. You test one. It bursts on your tongue with just the right amount of defiance. Perfect. A knock at the side door. It's the backup grape holder arriving late and breathless. He forgot his sandals. He's carrying a basket of plums. He is in every way unprepared. You don't raise your voice. You simply hand him the smallest bowl and assign him to peripheral path B, also known as the hallway between the atrium and the bath lowest traffic minimal pressure. This is your gift, your power, knowing who can handle the balcony and who should stick to the shadows. Sir wins around your ankles as the final trays are set. You crouch to scratch behind his ears and whisper, ready for showtime. He doesn't answer, obviously, but he licks his paw and flicks his tail in time with the opening flute notes, which is basically a yes, and so you rise. The grapes gleam, the light warms, the door opens. Guests begin to arrive, cheeks powdered hair, oiled secrets already stirring behind their eyes, and in the corner of the room, a young woman raises a single grape in her fingers. Holding it like a poem, there is a chaise, long curved lacquered, carved with acanthus leaves and lion's feet. It took 3 men to carry it in, and 2 philosophers to argue over which direction it should face. But you orgy planner extraordinaire have a more urgent concern. It's naked, no drapes, no cushions, no silks cascading like an accidental poem, just bare wood, glorious, vulnerable, and utterly inappropriate. You stare at it like it's a guest who showed up without a toga, because in Rome, furniture does not appear undressed. Let's set the stage. Romans didn't just sit, they reclined, sprawled, lounged, one elbow propped, the other hand trailing wine or honey or an opinion. And the furniture, it had to match the mood. A nude piece of furniture, a couch with no cover, a bench with no drapery was a sign of negligence. Or worse, Republican values. Too plain, too honest, too wooden. And your orgy, not the place for honesty. You summon the fabric attendants. Yes, that's a real thing. A pair of young men appear, arms laden with textiles, swaths of gauze, velvet, and imported Persian blends, so sheer they could be mistaken for air. You begin the ritual. Layering is an art. Too much fabric, and the couch disappears into a swamp of folds. Too little, and it looks like someone tried and gave up halfway through. So you layer, first a base of dark red silk to anchor. Second, gold-edged velvet draped diagonally. Third, a single ribbon of translucent green folded like a vine. It now looks less like a seat and more like a suggestion. Exactly right. Let's pause for a curious detail. There's a fragment of graffiti in Pompeii that reads, "She offered me a chair unwrapped. I fled." Some scholars argue it's metaphorical. Others claim it's literal, because the presentation of furniture was a form of flirting. To offer someone a well-draped couch was to say, "I care about your comfort and your aesthetic alignment." To offer a bare seat was like forgetting a name mid-introduction. Unforgivable. Back to your chaise. It's stunning now. The curves accented. The legs partially veiled like a dancer's thigh. The scent of fresh linen mixing with the faintest trace of pine oil left over from polishing. Sir jumps onto it, circles 3 times, settles like a sphinx. You pause. You consider throwing him off. But honestly, he completes the look. You move on to the other seats. The duplex bench for whispering pairs. The tripod stool for dramatic monologues. The corner lounge that invites both intimacy and escape, depending on the angle of one's ankle. Each is draped, brushed, adjusted. You check for wrinkles. You check for wobbles. You sit on each one, briefly, just enough to test. You once caught a wobble too late, and a visiting poet collapsed during a toast. He called it a metaphor. You called it a mistake. Let's drift toward the philosophical. Is furniture identity? Cicero once claimed that the way one arranged a room revealed more than the words one spoke inside it. If so, then tonight you are saying, "Welcome." You are held softly, generously, a little seductively, but also, we planned this. We planned you, because Roman pleasure was never wrong. It was curated. Even spontaneity had a seating chart. The final touch tassels. You attach one to the corner of the chaise, not because anyone will notice, but because you will, and that's enough. Guests begin to arrive. One removes his sandals with theatrical grace and glides toward the corner lounge. He hesitates. He touches the silk. He smiles. You watch from behind the column invisible. You see how he reclines precisely as you hoped he would. One elbow down, one knee up, head tilted just so. He doesn't know this moment has been rehearsed by you with cushions for weeks. But it has. Sir purrs from the chaise. The room is golden, the furniture dressed. The guests unaware of how much care has gone into their comfort, and you finally exhale. Because nothing is more satisfying than a room that works. There is a list, a short one, but sacred, songs that are absolutely categorically never to be played at a Roman orgy, not because they're vulgar. No vulgarity has its place, but because they're too sentimental, too tragic, too capable of triggering someone's entire life story with just a single plucked string. And tonight, on a night of silks and candlelight laughter and low murmurs, you guard that list like it's state policy, because one wrong melody and the whole room unravels. Let's rewind. The musicians have arrived. There are 4 of them, one lyrist, one double piper, one with a strange harp thing from Syria, and one who mostly hums but is very handsome and was requested by 3 guests. You greet them politely. You hand them wine dates and the scroll, not a musical score, a do not play list. It's titled simply Tunes That Have Caused Unrest, revised. Let's explore the top 3 offenders. Ode to the Abandoned Wife, a haunting ballad written by a widow who drowned herself in a well, except historically she didn't drown. She remarried. But the song feels like drowning. It once caused a senator to declare his love to a marble statue. The statue declined. The shepherd's farewell band, because of a single flute note described in historical texts as emotionally manipulative. One guest heard it remembered his youth and walked into the sea, naked. In winter, he was fine, but the soup went cold. Wine will never leave you. A popular tavern song sounds harmless, but it tends to create weeping circles of men declaring undying love to their goblets. It also inspires spontaneous toasts which delay the dessert course. Unforgivable. You tell the musicians nothing in D minor, nothing with the word always in the lyrics, nothing written by a man who cried while writing it. They nod solemnly. They understand. Musicians know power. They've seen guests fall in love, collapse in grief, and begin political revolutions, all because a note lingered too long. Sir slinks between their feet, pausing to sniff the double pipes. He disapproves of the hummer. You take this under advisement. Let's take a historical aside. Ancient Roman music was more than entertainment. It was navigation. A party without music was considered unfinished. And the wrong song at the wrong moment, a social ambush. Some hosts employed mood shifters, musicians who could transition a room from flirtation to reverence in under 30 seconds. Others had emotional buffers, background harpists, trained to drown out awkward silences with soft arpeggios. You've hired both. Tonight, your program is carefully timed. Arrival soft lyre tuned to a heartbeat pace. First, wine flutes high and playful. Mid-event drums added, but quietly like distant thunder. Late night silence broken only by breath and silk and secrets. But you know how fragile it is. All it takes is one overly emotional chord. You remember last season, A new musician snuck in a personal composition, a slow, aching tune called Moonlight on Abandoned Sandals. No lyrics, just grief in harp form. Within minutes, a dancer collapsed. A married guest kissed a former rival, and someone began loudly questioning the purpose of pleasure in a mortal life. The party ended early. You sent the musician home with a complimentary fruit basket and never invited him back. Tonight, you are vigilant. You give the signal when to transition. You tilt your head to lower the tempo. You raise a hand to silence the hummer when he drifts into melancholy. You even pass a note to the flutist that reads, if you're about to play something nostalgic. Don't, he nods. Switches to something vaguely Egyptian. Good, a guest approaches you. She says, what was that song just now? You tense. But she continues, it made me feel like I was in love with the idea of olives. You relax. That's exactly the goal. Emotion, lightly, not deeply. Like scent, like breeze. Sir sits on the harpist's stool when she stands. You whisper, guard the strings. He closes his eyes. You know he will. The night wears on. The music swells, recedes, flows like tide. There is laughter, yes, but no sobbing, no impromptu poetry, no existential crises at the cheese tray. You've done it. You've curated a perfect soundscape, invisible, delicate, essential. And when the last guest rises, humming gently, eyes half closed with contentment and not regret, you smile. Because in a world of words and wine and wonder, the notes you didn't play mattered most. The guests believe they are drinking wine. They swirl it, they sip it, they sniff and nod and say things like, ah, Falernian 43 BCE, very forward nose. One man claims it reminds him of a sunset over Rhodes. You smile politely because you know the truth. That isn't Falernian. That isn't even wine. Not really. Let's uncork this gently. In Rome, wine wasn't just a beverage. It was a performance. Yes, there were amphorae labeled with vintage years and vineyard names sealed with wax and pride. But for events like tonight, when mood matters more than history, you don't pour real Falernian. You pour illusion. Your mixture tonight, a little fermented date syrup, a hint of crushed rose petals, a dash of vinegar for authenticity, and just enough red beet juice to mimic the exact shade of a well-aged vintage. You call it the house blend. No one knows. And more importantly, no one asks, because they're too busy believing. Let's drift sideways into a strange detail. Romans loved wine, but they also loved faking it. There are surviving recipes for wine enhancement that include boiling with herbs to disguise age, mixing with seawater for tang, adding chalk to reduce acidity, and even tossing in lead shavings for smoothness. Don't worry you skipped that part. One poet even described a host who used ink to darken his table blend. His guests, the poet wrote, drank poems. None survived the stanza. Back to your table. The goblets are ceramic, hand-painted with scenes of Bacchus and laughter. You chose them deliberately. Metal cups feel too formal. Glass ones risk revealing too much. But ceramic lets you hide everything. A swirl of crimson mystery. You observe your guests. Some sip delicately, some slurp with abandon. One man drinks with his pinky lifted so high, you fear he might take flight. But none of them know that what they're drinking is barely wine at all. And that's the magic. Sir strolls past the jug. He sniffs it, sneezes, and keeps walking. Even he knows. You once tried serving actual Falernian. It was aged, real, expensive. Guests complained. Too sour, one said. Not enough sweetness, another. Reminds me of my mother-in-law, one man declared, confusing everyone. So now you serve experience, not product. You've created a wine that tastes like memory, but costs like vinegar. It's what the night demands. Let's flirt with a bit of philosophy. In Roman thought, wine was never about the wine. It was about who you drank it with, how you lifted the cup, what silence followed the second sip. Cicero once claimed that the mark of a man is in how he toasts his enemy. You've seen that in action. Just last month, a general toasted a poet with such warmth, the poet fainted. No poison, just emotion. You refill a cup with a smile. The guest thanks you, says it's the finest vintage he's had all year. You nod. Say aged in the western wind and move on. He'll repeat that at dinner parties for months. You've given him a story, not a drink. At the back of the room, one guest lingers near the jug. He peers in, frowns. You walk over slowly. He whispers, "Is this cabbage?" You raise an eyebrow. "I could tell you," you say, "but then it wouldn't taste the same." He laughs, takes another sip, and doesn't ask again. Perfect. Let's sip one last strange fact. Some Roman hosts had false sommeliers, actors trained to invent tasting notes. They'd approach guests and say things like, "This one was aged beneath a fig tree during eclipse." You'll notice a slight aftertaste of prophecy. Fermented under the singing moon. No one challenged them, because no one wants to argue with a good story. As the night deepens, the wine flows, tongues loosen, shoulders relax. The room hums, and you adjust the jug ever so slightly. Make sure the light hits it just right. And then you whisper to no one in particular, "It was a good year for illusion." Sir agrees. He's curled beneath the jug, snoring softly. You don't correct him. The guests believe they are drinking wine. They swirl it, they sip it, they sniff and nod and say things like, Falernian 43 BCE, very forward nose. One man claims it reminds him of a sunset over Rhodes. You smile politely, because you know the truth. That isn't Falernian. That isn't even wine. Not really. Let's uncork this gently. In Rome, wine wasn't just a beverage, it was a performance. Yes, there were amphorae labeled with vintage years and vineyard names sealed with wax and pride. But for events like tonight, when mood matters more than history, you don't pour real Falernian. You pour illusion. Your mixture tonight, a little fermented date syrup, a hint of crushed rose petals, a dash of vinegar for authenticity, and just enough red beet juice to mimic the exact shade of a well-aged vintage. You call it house blend. No one knows. And more importantly, no one asks, because they're too busy believing. Let's drift sideways into a strange detail. Romans loved wine, but they also loved faking it. There are surviving recipes for wine enhancement that include boiling with herbs to disguise age, mixing with seawater for tang, adding chalk to reduce acidity, and even tossing in lead shavings for smoothness. Don't worry you skip that part. One poet even described a host who used ink to darken his table blend. His guests, the poet wrote, drank poems. None survived the stanza. Back to your table. The goblets are ceramic hand painted with scenes of Bacchus and laughter. You chose them deliberately. Metal cups feel too formal. Glass ones risk revealing too much. But ceramic lets you hide everything. A swirl of crimson mystery. You observe your guests. Some sip delicately, some slurp with abandon. One man drinks with his pinky lifted so high you fear he might take flight. But none of them know that what they're drinking is barely wine at all. And that's the magic. Sir strolls past the jug. He sniffs it, sneezes, and keeps walking. Even he knows. You once tried serving actual Falernian. It was aged, real, expensive. Guests complained. Too sour, one said. Not enough sweetness, another. Reminds me of my mother-in-law, one man declared, confusing everyone. So now you serve experience, not product. You've created a wine that tastes like memory, but costs like vinegar. It's what the night demands. Let's flirt with a bit of philosophy. In Roman thought, wine was never about the wine. It was about who you drank it with, how you lifted the cup, what silence followed the second sip. Cicero once claimed that the mark of a man is in how he toasts his enemy. You've seen that in action. Just last month, a general toasted a poet with such warmth, the poet fainted. No poison, just emotion. You refill a cup with a smile. The guest thanks you, says it's the finest vintage he's had all year. You nod. Say, aged in the western wind, and move on. He'll repeat that at dinner parties for months. You've given him a story, not a drink. At the back of the room, one guest lingers near the jug. He peers in, frowns. You walk over slowly. He whispers, "Is this cabbage?" You raise an eyebrow. "I could tell you, you say, but then it wouldn't taste the same." He laughs, takes another sip, and doesn't ask again. Perfect. Let's sip one last strange fact. Some Roman hosts had false sommeliers, actors trained to invent tasting notes. They'd approach guests and say things like, "This one was aged beneath a fig tree during eclipse." You'll notice a slight aftertaste of prophecy, fermented under the singing moon. No one challenged them, because no one wants to argue with a good story. As the night deepens, the wine flows. Tongues loosen. Shoulders relax. The room hums. And you adjust the jug ever so slightly. Make sure the light hits it just right. And then you whisper to no one in particular. It was a good year for illusion, Sir agrees. He's curled beneath the jug, snoring softly. You don't correct him. It starts with a squeak. Barely audible, just a faint, rubbery little protest as someone shifts their foot on the marble floor. You freeze, because you know that sound. It's not scandal, not betrayal, not spilled wine or collapsing furniture. It's worse. It's the sound of a modern sandal, too new, too grippy, too loud. And in this room of silk whispers and perfumed air, it is a betrayal of the highest order. Let's set the stage. Roman footwear was many things. Status symbol, fashion statement, engineering marvel. But above all, it was quiet. Sandals were made of soft leather, dyed with berries and walnut hulls, stitched by hand by men who spoke in hushed tones about arch support. There were sandals for senators, sandals for soldiers, sandals for seduction. Each pair said something. Yours say this event is planned, which is why the squeaky intruder must be dealt with. You identify the offender. A man near the mosaic fountain, young, nervous, smiling too much. His sandals are new bright straps, shiny soles, thick enough to stop a dagger. They belong to a market vendor, not a midnight party. You sigh, you approach. Let's take a historical pause. Romans had entire debates, actual written debates about sandal etiquette. One philosopher argued that sandals should be so soft they fall off if you think too hard. Another claimed stiff sandals led to stiff thoughts. There were laws about when to wear calce formal shoes versus soleil soft slippers, and you could be fined for squeaking during a sacred procession. Your event may not be sacred, but the rules still apply. Back to the offender. You kneel beside him, smiling. He thinks you're flirting. You gently tug the heel strap. It makes that sound again. He winces. Try these, you whisper, producing a pair of backup sandals from under your cloak. They're soft, well-worn, dusted with lavender powder. He looks confused. You smile wider. They breathe better. He accepts. Sir appears just then, circling the guest, sniffing his feet. Judgment. You whisper he's new. Sir flicks his tail. Approval pending. Let's talk logistics. You keep 12 spare pairs on hand at all times, organized by size, style, and mood. Guest who forgot. Guest who regrets. Guest who ran here barefoot. Emergency seduction. Each pair pre-softened, pre-powdered, pre-approved. You once saved an entire evening with a pair of crimson half sandals trimmed in gold. The guest wore nothing else. Literally, there's a reason for all this care, because noise breaks the spell, and a squeaky soul in a room of harps and hush is like a goat at a funeral. You've been to one of those too. Long story. Let's detour into a curious detail. Romans believed bad sandals caused bad behavior. One text from the 2nd century warns, a guest in tight straps will speak only of himself. Another says, loose laces, loose lips. And one particularly dramatic proverb, let the man whose shoes squeak leave before the olives arrive. You live by that. Back in the chamber, the atmosphere resets. The replacement sandals glide. The marble floor sighs in relief. The young guest walks like he's floating now, shoulders looser, steps quieter, face calmer. A good sandal changes a man. You retreat to the corner. Check the rest of the footwear. One guest is barefoot acceptable, encouraged. One wears sandals dyed in peacock colors, risky, but it works. Another has decorated his soles with pressed petals. That one's an artist or a liar, probably both. You let it be. Sir climbs onto a windowsill, watches the crowd. You see his ears twitch. The soundscape is correct again. Silks rustle, goblets click, harps hum. No squeaks, no thuds, no jarring reminders that this is still the real world. Only the soft footfalls of planned pleasure. And you kneel briefly by the sandal chest. You straighten one pair. The emergency ones with emerald inlays. They've never been used, but you like knowing they're there. Because when the feet are at peace, the soul follows. It begins the moment they step through the curtain. Not a sound, not a word, just a breath. Deep, reflexive, unconscious, because the air is different here. Thicker, warmer, layered like silk over silk, and tinged with a scent no one can name, but everyone feels. It's not perfume, not incense, not smoke. It's design. You made it. Let's exhale and begin. Scent in Rome was not decoration. It was strategy. You don't just want the room to smell good. You want it to direct mood. You want a guest walking through one door to feel seduced and another to feel soothed. You want them to relax before they even sit, to fall in love before the first look. So you scent the space like a musician tunes a lyre, note by note, layer by layer. Tonight's bass note, crushed myrrh and almond oil, soft, nutty ancient. It clings to the walls like memory. Middle note, cinnamon and honeyed pine resin. Warmth that moves, not sweet, but curious. It lingers just at the edge of breath. Top note, orange blossom water. A whisper of brightness. Not too floral. Just enough to make someone think of summer and not know why. You don't use burners. Too strong. You use bowls of warm water hidden under couches. You soak linen in rose vinegar and tuck it behind curtains. You dab mint oil at the base of goblets. Everything invisible, everything intentional. Let's take a detour. In Pompeii, archaeologists found a scroll labeled simply Scent Map. It charted a villa room by room. Entryway, cedar and vinegar. Atrium, rose and ash. Garden path, thyme and olive brine. One scholar believes it was a guide to emotional architecture. You believe it was a party plan. Sir sneezes. He hates the orange blossom. Prefers sandalwood. You make a note to adjust next time. Let's talk accidents. A few years ago, you made a mistake. You used too much cardamom oil near the couches. Within 20 minutes, 3 guests were asleep. One dreamed of being married to a dolphin. It took hours to wake them. You learned scent is powerful. Too powerful if left unattended. So now you test everything. You scent your own robes before the event. You walk through each corner. You count your reactions. 1 blink, cash, balanced. 2, overdone. 3, start over. Let's blend in a curious Roman belief. That smell was the soul's shadow. You'll find it in fringe texts, philosophers who wrote about breath memory, the way a scent could summon not just a moment, but a version of yourself. You use this. Tonight, your goal is to help each guest remember the most peaceful part of themselves, even if they've never met it before. At the buffet table, the figs are arranged in bowls lined with lavender leaves. Not for flavor, though, that helps. For scent. Each time someone reaches for fruit, they inhale calm. At the pillows near the fountain, you've stitched sachets into the seams. Not visible, just present, like kindness that doesn't need applause. One guest pauses by a curtain. He closes his eyes. He breathes deeply. You see his shoulders drop. That's it. That's the moment. You've guided him from citizen to guest, from guest to participant. He doesn't know why, but you do. Let's add one last layer, your own scent. You wear a blend no one else touches. Spikenard, a whisper of fig bark, a breath of iris root. It's not strong, but when you pass by, people look up. Not in recognition, in curiosity, and that's all you need. Sir sits on the windowsill again. He sniffs the air, closes his eyes, purrs. You whisper, perfect balance tonight. He yawns in agreement, and as the night flows forward, the music, the fabric, the laughter, it is all suspended in this warm, invisible web of breath and memory. And you You move through it like a conductor through a symphony made of scent. You never see their faces. That's the point. They move like wind, like sighs, like the hush that follows a perfectly timed joke. They do not speak, at least not loudly. But every corner of tonight's gathering breathes because of them. They are the curtain whisperers. They don't wear togas. They don't sparkle or perform. Their garments are dark soft, designed to blend with shadows and folds of fabric. You've trained them to walk without echo, to bow without bending, to vanish mid-blink. Each of them can set a table with one hand and calm a guest with the other. They are the invisible architecture of pleasure. Let's draw back the curtain gently, literally. The whisperers are stationed throughout the villa, behind the main curtain too, by the food alcove one, at the far fountain where arguments tend to bloom like algae one more. They don't carry trays, they carry mood, a slightly raised eyebrow, a barely audible hum, a slow looping gesture of the hand. Guests rid it all without realizing. A curtain whisperer can stop a fight before it starts just by adjusting the drape of a sleeve. You hired your first one years ago. She was a retired temple dancer with a limp scar behind her ear and the uncanny ability to fold a cloak in 3 seconds. She said she didn't want to talk anymore. You said perfect. She taught you the rhythm of silence. Let's slip into a historical sidebar. Roman elites employed shadow staff people who were never listed on rosters or salary scrolls, but who managed the emotional flow of the household. They weren't cooks, they weren't musicians, they were adjusters. One ancient text calls them the ones who move air. They carried no titles, only respect and fear. Tonight, your whisperers handle. Fabric flow no curtain should ever slap. Drink temperature wine should feel like the memory of warmth. Guest traffic, no one wants to bump into their rival by the olives. Emotional repair. If someone starts weeping, don't stop them. Just surround them with softness. It's all done without orders. They know. Sir watches one of them work. She kneels to tie a sandal strap for a sleeping guest. She doesn't wake him. The knot is soft, the gesture gentler still. Sir flicks his tail once. Approval. You whisper, she's the best one. Let's name some of their tools. Oilcloth for spills, rose water for tension. A tiny bell used once per party. A velvet square for catching falling earrings. A wooden fan for redirecting gossip. You'd be surprised how effective a breeze is. You once saw one of them extinguish a feud just by refilling a bowl of almonds at the right moment. No words, no fuss, just almonds. Guests never notice them, or if they do, they think, oh, that curtain moved. They don't see the hand that moved it. That's the magic. One guest, a senator's wife, pauses mid-sentence. She glances toward the far curtain, frowns slightly, then smiles. Someone's shape is outlined there for just a second. Gone the next. The woman changes the topic. Crisis averted. Let's indulge in one last historical curiosity. There's a legend about a woman named Laelia who hosted 1,000 gatherings without a single guest remembering the face of her staff. Yet her parties were known to heal feuds, spark marriages, and silence even the most ambitious poets. Some said she had ghosts. You know better. She had whisperers. As the night deepens, their movements shift slower, like twilight shadows. One pulls a curtain closed as the wind changes. Another adjusts the angle of a lamp so it flatters a guest's profile just as he begins a story. You watch them work heart steady, because with them you never worry. Sir curls up behind the velvet drape. You see only the tip of his tail twitching in rhythm. He's safe there. He knows that space is sacred, where the world is softened, where the unseen keep everything together. You raise your cup, not to toast, just to acknowledge, and somewhere maybe behind you, maybe beneath the couch, someone nods back, unseen, as it should be. It seems innocent enough, a tray of warm bread, golden, glowing, light catching the crust just so, steam rising in little swirls that whisper, I am comfort. But you know better. Bread, like music, like scent, like glances, has its time. And when it arrives too early, it unravels everything. Let's break it gently. Romans took bread seriously, not just the eating of it, but the timing. Bread too early says we are peasants. Bread too late says we are starving. Bread at the wrong moment says someone lost control. So when the young assistant appears in the doorway, arms full of still steaming loaves, you don't panic, but your eyebrow does rise half a millimeter. Let's take a bite of context. Tonight's menu is paced like a poem. Olives first, figs second, wine always, bread third. Never before the laughter thickens and the second song has played. Because bread is anchor food, it settles, it slows, it turns conversation from flirtation to philosophy. And if you anchor too soon, guests forget they're floating. They forget to dance. You glide across the room. The assistant sees you. He freezes. He knows. But the bread, it's already in the air. A guest turns, smells it, smiles, reaches out. You intercept. With a hand that looks like a gesture of welcome, you take the tray. I'll warm it a touch longer, you whisper. The assistant bows, vanishes behind the curtain. Crisis delayed. Sir appears near your ankle. He sniffs the tray, licks one loaf, of course. He knows the difference between just baked and just right. Let's detour into a curious truth. Ancient Roman hosts sometimes salted the timing of their meals. They trained staff to deliver scent before food, to pass by with trays of dishes they'd never serve just to spark desire. One philosopher claimed expectation is the most filling course. You agree. Tonight's bread wasn't about hunger. It was about control. You retreat with the tray, but you don't hide it. You let the scent drift subtle, tempting. You set it on a ledge where warm air rises. Guests catch hints of it. They whisper, bread already soon, maybe. Perfect. Now they're anticipating. Now they're leaning in. Now they're ready. You give the signal. Two whisperers move. One adjusts the lamps to a lower glow. One opens the side curtain slightly, letting in a breeze. The mood shifts. You nod. Now, bread time. The tray returns. Same loaves, same scent. But now it's welcome. Now it's part of the story. Guests reach, tear, dip in oil, in wine, in silence. You watch the pace change. Conversations deepen, eyes soften. Someone quotes a poet and no one laughs. Bread has arrived. Let's close with one last detail. In some villas, hosts flavored the first bite of bread with rose water or ashes of fig leaves to spark memory, not for taste, for emotional alignment. A quiet way of saying, let this food remind you who you are or who you long to be. You do that tonight. just a touch of lavender on the first loaf, and someone at the far couch sighs, you smile, because you know exactly what that sigh means. Sir curls beneath the bread table, the warmest spot, smart cat, and you lift a piece yourself, tear it, taste it, not for hunger, for presence. Because in this house, bread does not just feed, it grounds. He arrives late, not dramatically, so just enough to make an entrance feel like a choice. Tall, older, shoes dusted from the walk, and under one arm, a pillow, soft, squashy, the color of overripe figs, worn on one corner with embroidery faded from what once may have been a phoenix, or maybe a fish. He doesn't explain it. He simply nods at the doorman, glides past the curtain and settles onto the nearest couch, places the pillow beside him, pats it once, exhales, like home. Let's take a moment to inhale the unusual. Guests bring things, it's expected. Wine, gossip, occasionally fruit, sometimes secrets, but not pillows, never pillows. The rule is clear, comfort is provided, and yet here he is, with fabric confidence. Sir notices first. He circles the man, sniffs the pillow, sneezes, then astonishingly, he lies down next to it, not on it, just near it. You raise an eyebrow. That's a first. Let's take a scroll back in time. Romans had a curious relationship with cushions. They prized softness, but distrusted it. A philosopher once wrote, "The body should not mold the world to its shape, but meet it with fortitude." He also had gout and no friends. In elite households, pillows were chosen for appearance, not use. They were filled with feathers, dried moss, or once in a particularly luxurious case, cooked lentils. But always they were yours to supply. Hosts provided, guests received. That was the balance. But this guest, he upends the balance. You observe him. He doesn't flaunt the pillow, doesn't even speak of it. He simply uses it, places it under his elbow, adjusts it slightly when he leans, taps it once before a particularly long story. It is his comfort anchor, and no one seems to mind. In fact, others begin to notice. A guest nearby shifts uncomfortably on a beaded bolster. Another eyes a particularly stiff cushion with new resentment. One woman subtly folds her scarf into a makeshift neck rest. The room is evolving, all because one man brought softness with him. You have options. You could remove the pillow, declare a policy, send a whisperer with a polite excuse. But instead, you sit beside him, gesture toward it. It's seen some journeys, you say. He nods. It's older than some senators, he replies. You laugh. He doesn't. Let's detour into a peculiar practice. Some Roman guests brought lucky objects to gatherings. A ring, a coin, a dried pomegranate tucked into a sleeve. But a pillow, that's a commitment to comfort, and perhaps a quiet rebellion. Because in a world of performance, the man with his own softness writes his own rules. Later, as the lyre players rest and the figs are passed, the man drifts into a nap, not loud, not theatrical. Just the kind of nap only a man with his own pillow dares to take in public. You dim the lamp near his couch. No one protests. Someone else stretches. Another guest asks for a blanket. The ripple continues. You wonder, what would happen if more people brought their own softness? Would they listen better, speak kinder, sleep sooner? Sir yawns. Still curled beside the guest, still not touching the pillow. Respect, perhaps. At the edge of the room, a whisperer appears. She gestures silently, offering you one of the villa's finest cushions. You decline. Tonight, the best seat in the house already belongs to the man with the faded phoenix. You let him rest, because sometimes being a good host means not interrupting comfort. The fan. It's not the words that shift the room. Not a joke, not a scandal, not even a toast. It's a breeze, soft, measured, intentional. A fan barely the size of a dinner plate unfolds with a rustle like silk in a dream. And in that moment, all conversation changes direction. Let's open this slowly. You keep fans on hand for many reasons. To cool guests, to move scent, to signal whisperers without words, to redirect attention when a moment needs saving. But this fan, this one is special, painted with tiny cranes, ribs of polished cedar, a tassel the color of deep wine, and just enough weight to make every movement feel deliberate. You don't fan wildly, just one smooth sweep, from knee to shoulder, like brushing away the last thought of a long afternoon. It catches the attention of a guest mid-sentence. He pauses, tilts his head, rephrases, and just like that, the conversation is better. Let's whisper a bit of history. In ancient Rome, flabella ceremonial fans were symbols of divinity and power. Priests carried them, emperors too. But among the quietly powerful, fans were instruments of social steering. There are scrolls that mention fan language, the way one could express boredom, encouragement, even flirtation with a few artful motions. You've studied it all. You use it like a second tongue. Sir watches you fan. He squints against the breeze, then settles deeper into his nap. Good sign. Let's examine the moment. Before the fan, a guest was bragging, loudly repeating a story about his vineyard. Others were losing interest. One woman rolled her eyes. You didn't interrupt. You simply lifted the fan, tilted it toward the figs. One sweep. Now the topic has shifted to travel. Wider, softer, shared. You smile, because control doesn't always come from volume. Sometimes it's in the wind. Let's detour into an oddity. There's a Roman tale of a hostess who silenced a duel with a single feathered fan. She placed it between the two men, said, "If you can strike past this, you may duel." Neither dared. The fan was too elegant. Tonight, your fan stops several disasters. A spilled drink deflected from a scroll with one breeze. A too bold joke redirected with a cooling flutter. A bored poet inspired again by the shifting air. The fan becomes a presence, not loud, but felt. You've seen others try to imitate. A young host once waved a fan like a fly swatter. Guests flinched, wine splashed. Sir left the room entirely. You sent him a scroll later, titled, "The Fan is Not a Weapon." Let's consider the fan's nature. It is ephemeral, air with shape, gesture with intent, and yet it leaves no mark, only mood. Later, as candles flicker and guests recline deeper into cushions, someone says, "Was it warmer earlier?" Another replies, "No, just tenser." You say nothing. The fan rests in your lap now, closed. Its work is done. Sir stretches, sniffs the air, returns to sleep. Approval again. And you tuck the fan into your sleeve, ready for the next moment, the next shift, the next breath that needs direction. Because in a room full of voices, Sometimes it's the quietest gesture that speaks the loudest. The candle that refused to die. It begins as a flicker, harmless, charming even, a tiny flame dancing in the corner of the room, its wick bowed its wax, melting like butter left out too long. You've lit hundreds of candles in your life. Some are brief, some dramatic, some smoke like they're sighing. But this one simply refuses to go out. Let's drift into the scene. You've begun your soft descent into the evening's slower rhythms. Guests lean, laughter hums, wine grows heavier in the cup, and one of your whisperers moves silent as ever-snuffing candles to ease the room toward rest. One by one the flames vanish, except this one. It's a thin candle tucked on a side table near the old bronze bust of Jupiter. A humble little flame, maybe sandalwood wax, maybe fig. The whisperer pinches it with the snuffer. Still it burns. She tries again, then again. Then she glances at you. It's a look that says, this candle has an opinion. You rise, cross the floor slowly. The guests don't notice yet. But Sir lifts his head, watches. He knows a scene is forming. Let's pause for a historical aside. Romans believed certain candles held memory. They were called lucernae fidelis, faithful lights. Candles that refused to die were said to be lit by intention, not by flame. One scroll warns, a candle that burns beyond its time is either cursed or correct. You've always liked that ambiguity. You arrive at the table. The candle flickers once high, then low. You kneel. You try the snuffer yourself. No luck. You feel heat brush your knuckles. Not painful, just persistent. You whisper, "All right, little one, you've made your case." Let's detour briefly into practicality. Some candles resist snuffing because of air drafts, twisted wicks, or resin-heavy wax. But this is theater, unscripted, perfect. You stand, glance toward the nearest guest. She's watching now. Others turn. The candle has become the center of gravity. You smile, raise a hand. Let it burn you, say softly. There's a murmur, curious, amused, relaxed. The room accepts this. The whisperer bows. You've turned an inconvenience into a ritual. Sir circles the table. He sniffs the air. Then, with incredible drama, he sits directly in the candle's glow. It lights his fur like poetry. Let's explore the strange effect. After the declaration, "Let it burn," conversation deepens. Someone tells a memory they've never shared. Another uncorks a sweeter wine. One man sings not loudly, not well, but with real emotion. The candle stays. It becomes a companion, not just a tool. You wonder, did it know? Did it sense the room's need for one more anchor, one last spark, before surrendering to the slow dark? Let's end with one last curiosity. In some Roman funeral rites, a single candle was left to burn beside the body, not for light, but for reminder. A gentle way of saying something lingers. Not everything is meant to end on time. Eventually, much later, after the final cup, after Sir has vanished into sleep, after the whisperers have disappeared like breath, the candle wavers. Then, as if finally satisfied, it dies on its own. No smoke, just a silent goodbye. You bow your head, not dramatically, just in respect, not for the candle, but for the moment it gave you. The philosopher who forgot his shoes You don't notice him at first. He arrives like a drifting thought, quiet, barefoot, slightly confused about where the doorway ends and the carpet begins. His toga is clean, if a bit uneven. His hair combed once. His scrolls none. Just a small pouch tied at his waist and a smudge of ink on his wrist. And no shoes. Not sandals, not slippers, not even the ceremonial toe rings some poets insist count. Just bare feet, dusty from the alley. Let's pause for etiquette. In Rome, shoes mean status. Not just hygiene or protection, though. Of course there's that. But class, intention, entry. A guest who arrives barefoot makes a statement even if he doesn't mean to. Tonight's guest. He didn't mean to. You tilt your head. He notices you noticing, offers a shrug. I was thinking, he says. Then I was walking, then I was here. You nod. Fair enough. Sir appears beside him, sniffs the philosopher's feet, winces, then unbelievably sits beside him anyway. Interesting. Let's stroll into a historical footnote. Some Roman thinkers believed the soul entered the body through the soles of the feet. That contact with the earth allowed clarity. Pliny mentions a certain sage who refused all footwear after a revelation during a barefoot walk. He also developed an impressive collection of splinters. Back to your guest. He doesn't ask for slippers. He doesn't offer apology. He simply moves with the party, soft-footed, soft-spoken, yet strangely magnetic. Others begin to drift toward him, not because of novelty, because of ease. He's not performing. He's not calculating his posture or waiting to drop a witticism. He's simply there, present, dusty, grounded. One guest asks him a question about stoicism. He smiles, responds with a story about fish. It takes 15 minutes to reach the point, but no one minds. By the end, 3 people have removed their shoes. You watch, say nothing. Let's step into another tradition. Certain Roman banquets ended with guests removing footwear as a gesture of surrender, not to the host, to the night. A way of saying the performance is over. What remains is real. You've always loved that. The philosopher sits beside the fountain now. His feet dangle in the water. He hums something tuneless. A guest joins him, then another. The conversation grows quieter, not sleep, just slower, like walking in shallow tide. You approach with a cushion, offer it. He declines. The stone is cool, he says. My thoughts are warmer on it. You nod again. Still fair enough. Sir licks the man's foot, just once, then wanders off. His highest form of blessing. Let's end with a truth you've come to trust. Sometimes the most disruptive thing a guest can bring is nothing. No armor, no pose, no sandals, just their attention, their dust, their presence. And in doing so, they remind everyone, you don't always need to walk into a space fully formed. Sometimes it's enough just to arrive. Later, when the party fades and guests shuffle toward cloaks and quiet, someone asks you, do we have extra slippers? You smile. Not tonight, you say. Tonight, the floor was enough. The olive that rolled under the couch. It begins, as most unexpected moments do, with a soft thud. A guest laughs too hard. His hand flutters. A toothpick tips. And just like that, a single green olive glistening with oil and confidence escapes its plate. It arcs, it bounces, rolls, and then it vanishes under the couch. Let's slow the room. You hear it, not the sound of the olive itself, but the pause that follows. 3 guests track it with their eyes. One smirks. Another reaches half-heartedly, then leans back. It's gone, someone says. But you know better. Nothing's truly gone in a house like this, especially not olives. Let's drift into historical seasoning. Olives were everything to the Romans. Food, oil, ritual, metaphor. To lose one was considered unlucky in certain regions. A dropped olive at a banquet. That could be interpreted as a message, or if you're less dramatic, just a moment of honest, slippery chaos. Sir notices it next. From the shadows near the curtain, his ears tilt forward. Then, with the slow gravity of feline ritual, he moves past the cushions, around the sandals, toward the couch. He stops, stares. You follow. Let's take a tiny sidebar. Ancient texts describe a practice where household spirits, lares, were offered small tokens beneath furniture. Olives, figs, crumbs, not swept but left, gifts to the unseen. You've always liked that. Back to now. You crouch beside the couch. Not dramatic, just curious. And there it is, the olive, nestled in shadow, reflecting candlelight, looking oddly profound. You reach, not because you care about the olive, but because you care about the gesture. To retrieve what others abandoned, to restore the balance, to acknowledge the small. As your fingers brush the cool floor, something else brushes memory. You remember. The first party you hosted where olives were served too cold. The whispered advice of an old cookroom temperature reveals their story. The time you sat under this very couch as a child, hiding from guests and counting candle drips. This olive isn't just a snack. It's a breadcrumb trail through memory. You retrieve it. Stand. Hold it in your palm. One guest claps softly. Another lifts a cup in salute. A third boldly eats it. Laughter follows, but the moment lingers. Sir sits beside you. He blinks once. You know what he means. Nothing is too small to notice. Let's end with an old tale. A Roman general once tripped on a single olive pit and canceled an entire campaign. He claimed it was a sign from Jupiter. His men understandably did not argue. Some say the pit was planted there. Others say he simply wanted an excuse to stay home. Either way, it worked. Tonight, the olive doesn't start a war. It ends something else, a tension, a quietness, a thread of unease no one could name until it rolled under the couch and gave them permission to laugh. You settle back into your chair. The room breathes again. Guests return to figs and wine, and beneath the couch, a small shimmer of oil remains, a reminder that sometimes the heart of the evening rolls exactly where it needs to. The lamp that hummed at midnight. It doesn't sing, it doesn't creak, it doesn't flicker or flare. It hums, soft, low, like a memory remembering itself. You hear it first when the room is nearly asleep. Guests reclined, wine half drunk. One musician lost in a quiet pluck of strings, and then a sound that isn't quite a note, isn't quite silence, and yet is present. Let's trace it. The sound comes from the corner lamp, one of your oldest. Bronze base, curved handle, wick fed by oil steeped with orange peel and clove. It's not grand, not a centerpiece, but tonight it insists. You walk toward it, each step slow. barefoot now because the floor has claimed you. Sir is already there. He stares at the lamp as if he too hears the hum. His ears twitch with the rhythm. Let's drift into Roman life. Oil lamps were more than tools. They were companions, used in ritual, in offering, in poetry, in seduction, in grief. A good lamp gave light. A great lamp gave company. There's a story of a poet who kept one lamp for 50 years, refused to replace it, even as the handle bent, even as the wick charred unevenly. He called it his listener, said it knew the shape of his silence. Tonight, your lamp hums like that. Not broken, not warning, just existing, reminding you it's there, that it has always been there, that it sees you. You lower your face near the flame. The hum doesn't grow louder. It simply welcomes. Like breath over the rim of a cup, you close your eyes, and for a moment, just one, your thoughts settle. Let's dip into oddity. Some Roman households believed certain lamps retained echoes of voices, that if one listened closely, one could hear old conversations. Madness, maybe. But tonight, the lamp hums like it remembers something, a lullaby, a vow, a spilled secret, something soft, something still alive. You sit beside it. No command, no ritual, just presence. One guest notices, then another. No one speaks, no one needs to. The hum holds the room. It's not music, not quiet, but it is rhythm, a new kind of center. The night breathes around it. Sir curls near the lamp, close but not too close. He seems comforted, protected even. You understand. Eventually, a whisperer approaches, leans in. It's never done that before, she says. You nod. Maybe it's doing it for us. Let's end with an image. One day long from now, someone else will light this lamp, and maybe, just maybe, it will hum again, not because of memory, but because it once mattered to you, to Sir, to this quiet night of wine and figs and things not said aloud. You rise. Let the lamp be. It will stop when it's ready, or not. And either way, you've heard it. That's enough. The cushion that disappeared, you don't notice it at first. Of course you don't. Who tracks cushions? Their background comfort, supporting actors, soft scenery. But sometime between the end of the honeyed dates and the second round of fig wine, one of them simply vanishes. It's the small round one, stuffed with goose down, patterned in deep red and gold thread, gifted to you by a mosaic artist who never quite looked you in the eye. It always lived on the far couch. Always. Tonight, gone. At first, you think nothing of it. A whisperer might have moved it. A guest may have shifted it behind their back. Cushions are flighty by nature, but then a guest leans toward you, softly. Wasn't there another one? You nod, your eyes scan. Nothing. Let's drift into some Roman truth. Cushions were rarely decorative alone. They held status. They were gifted, loaned, even fought over in family inheritances. There are records of lawsuits over embroidered cushions. Softness, it turns out, invites passion. Back to now. You quietly ask your nearest whisperer. She checks. No, it hasn't been moved. Sir pads across the room, hopping onto the now lopsided couch. He circles the empty spot once, twice, then looks at you as if to say something is missing. Let's talk suspicion. Because even the softest nights, the warmest rooms, the sleepiest conversations can shift when something vanishes a ripple forms. It starts small. A guest adjusts their robe. Another clears their throat. A third stops mid-sentence. You feel it. The air thickens with the kind of silence that smells like cinnamon and curiosity. One guest jokes. Maybe someone stole it. Laughter, tight, too quick. You smile. But inside, your thoughts sharpen like a needle threading silk. You survey the room. Who would take a cushion? Who would need to, and why? Was it sentiment, spite, or more likely, nothing at all? Because the truth is, sometimes things leave, slip between folds of night, disappear under the weight of forgetting. Let's pause for a strange historical footnote. In one Roman villa, archaeologists found dozens of tiny objects buried inside the walls. Hairpins, spoons, cushion tassels. Scholars debate whether they were lost hidden or left intentionally. One theory, they were guilt offerings, soft thefts returned in quiet penance. Tonight, you decide not to investigate. Instead, you rise, pick up another cushion, place it in the vacant spot, smooth it, pat it once. Let's pretend it never left you, say with a smile. The room exhales. Just like that, the ripple breaks. Sir lies down on the new cushion, almost reluctantly, as if honoring the absence of the old one. He yawns, settles. The moment resets. But you won't forget, not because of mistrust, because of attention. You've learned that what disappears often leaves behind a whisper, a reminder that nothing in this room is ever just decoration. Everything holds a story, even goose down and gold thread. Later, long after the last guest leaves, and the floor is littered with sandals and forgotten grapes, you find something under the corner curtain. The cushion, not stolen, not misplaced, just tumbled, perhaps during the laughter, or the dancing, or the moment you looked away. You pick it up. It's warm, smells like wine and sandalwood. You smile. Of course, you leave it there for now. Let Sir find it in the morning. He'll be pleased. And the room will forgive the mystery. Because the best stories are the ones that disappear, then softly return. The guest who knew your name. It's not unusual for guests to arrive unannounced. Not in your home, not in Rome, not during a season like this when the breeze smells like ripe pears and old stories. But what is unusual is when a guest you don't recognize steps through the curtain, folds their hands politely and says your name, not your title, not your nickname, not the name you give to strangers or the one carved on the mosaic at the gate. Your true name, the one only a few remember, the one you've almost forgotten how to answer to. You pause, not out of fear, out of memory, because to be called truly is to be seen fully. And tonight, you are seen. Let's look at him. Modest tunic, no jewelry. A traveler's dust on his sandals, the kind that clings after many cities and one too many promises. Eyes like scroll parchment creases from squinting at too much sun, too much knowledge, too many unsaid things. He doesn't smile, but he does nod like an old chapter, quietly turning itself over. Let's pause here at this quiet crossroad. In Roman tradition, names were not just identifiers. They were invocations. A name held power. It tethered your identity to your family, your gods, your ancestors. Some people carried 2 names, others 3, a rare few 4. But the true name, the whispered one, the one saved for sacred spaces, was meant to be shielded. shared only with lovers, poets, or ghosts. You clear your throat. He asks, "Do you remember me?" You don't, not entirely. But something in your bones shifts. Not quite recognition, more like a softened edge where resistance once lived. Sir watches from the archway, unblinking. Then slowly he stands, circles behind the guest, and curiously does not hiss. That alone says something. The man speaks again. "Last time we spoke, you still believed in endings." That's all he says, and somehow it is enough. Because that sentence drops a stone into your memory's deep water, and the ripples begin to reach things you'd stored far below. The summer garden, the silver bowl, a letter that was never delivered. You remember almost everything. Let's drift into a stranger side. There is a myth of a Roman host who was visited once a decade by the same stranger. No one else remembered the visits. No one else saw the footprints in the ash. But each time, the host emerged wiser, quieter, changed. Scholars argue whether the visitor was real metaphor or the personified weight of conscience. Tonight, you don't argue. You offer wine. He accepts. He does not sip. He holds the cup like it holds more than drink. And when he speaks, it's not with words. It's with presence. You sit together. No questions, no performances. Just silence so rich, it feels like a second conversation happening just beneath the first. Sir climbs into your lap, then into his. Divided loyalty or shared trust. The others glance over. No one interrupts. Even those who don't know what's happening know something is happening. Because when the past arrives in the shape of a person, the room always listens. Let's linger a little longer. He finally says, "You kept the lamp." You blink. Yes, the bronze one. The one that hummed last week. The one you hadn't touched since. He adds, "It was my gift long ago." And suddenly, it makes sense. Not the lamp, not the hum, but the way you felt seen whenever you passed it. Eventually the guest stands. He does not ask to stay. He does not say goodbye. He simply says, "I only came to remind you, you are remembered." Then he leaves. You sit a little longer. Sir curls into your lap again. Purrs, like it means something. It does. And you whisper your name to yourself. Just once. Just softly. It sounds strange now, but not wrong. The wall that listens. You've always known the wall was old, older than the floor, older than the windows, older perhaps than even the house itself, made of stone, quarried from somewhere near Capua, chiseled by men who sang while they worked not for joy, but to keep rhythm. Some nights when the wind shifts, the wall smells faintly of basil and lime wash. Tonight it listens. It begins with a guest's whisper. Not important, not scandalous, just a soft remark about a lost love and a crooked spoon. But the wall catches it. You hear the sound fall against the stone, not bounce, not echo, settle as if absorbed. And that's when you notice the wall is doing more than holding the roof. Let's drift back in time. Romans often believed walls were alive, not sentient, not like animals, but aware, sensitive to tone. Temples were built with specific stones that held prayers longer. Bathhouses used marble that forgot things quickly. This wall, it remembers. Sir sits beside it now, back to stone, eyes closed like a cat meditating. You wonder if he's listening too. The evening unfolds like a soft scroll. Conversations roll, laughter rustles. The air tastes like honeyed wine and late-season grapes. And always the wall receives, not judging, not recording, just holding. There's a theory minor fringe but whispered in certain scrolls that stones with enough exposure to human voice develop tendencies, not thoughts, not decisions, but preferences. This wall, it prefers secrets told gently. It dislikes shouting. It likes lullabies, especially the off-key ones. You once leaned against it years ago and someone didn't come home. You remember how cool it felt. Not cold, just steady, like a parent's hand on your back. You didn't cry that night. But if you had, the wall would have kept the sound safe. Tonight, a guest leans in close to the stone. No one told her to. She just feels drawn. She rests her forehead against it and says nothing. But her breath fogs a small patch of plaster. When she pulls back, she smiles. A real one, the kind that means, I feel lighter. You don't ask. The wall already knows. Let's pause for an odd story. In the city of Pompeii, before the eruption, certain walls were etched with letters that no one remembered writing. Messages like, I was here before I knew myself. She touched this wall with her left hand. Forgive me. Scholars blame wine or mischief. But what if the wall simply wrote back? You rise from your chair, place your palm flat on the surface. It's warm, more than stone should be. You don't speak. You don't have to. The wall already remembers your voice. Sir stretches and touches the wall with one paw, then walks away tail high. That's his version of saying, you're welcome to stay, but I'm done for the night. You leave a candle nearby, low, soft. Walls need light too. When the last guest departs, they pause beside it, run their fingers along a shallow groove. They whisper a name not yours, not theirs. But the wall hears, and that's enough. Let's end with a truth. Not everything that listens needs to answer. Some things listen simply, so we remember how to speak. And so tonight, as silence returns, and Sir curls by the curtain, you fall asleep with your back to the wall, and dream of voices kept safe in stone. The chair that never squeaked. It isn't the grandest chair in the room. It doesn't have gold leaf, or curved lion legs, or the faint scent of cedar like the couch cushions do. But it has one remarkable trait. It never squeaks. Not when someone shifts, not when they lean, not even when the tall senator with knees like creaking ox cart wheels sits in it for an entire evening, always silent, always still. You call it the listening chair, though of course only to yourself. Let's begin with the truth. Silence is not always empty. Sometimes it's just watching. The chair stands to the left of the brazier, angled just so that one can see the whole room, but remain mostly unseen. Guests often choose it last, not because it's uncomfortable, but because something about it feels knowing, like sitting in it is a commitment. Sir never jumps into that chair. He will leap into your lap, onto scrolls, across the marble table if provoked, but never that chair. He simply walks by, respectfully, as if nodding to an elder. Let's sit in it, shall we? You lower yourself gently, and the moment you do, you feel it. Not a chill, not a warmth, just a stillness so complete it makes your pulse feel loud. You can see everything from here, the guests laughing by the olives, the wall that listens, the cushion that vanished and returned, the lamp that hummed. You are seated not at the center of the party, but at the center of awareness. There is a theory in certain architectural scrolls. Every well-lived room has a seat that remembers more than the rest. A throne of no ceremony, a place where secrets gather not because they're told aloud, but because they linger. This chair is that place. You once placed a guest there, a shy poet with a stammer. By the end of the night, they spoke in full verses. You once sat a soldier there who hadn't laughed in a year. He left smiling. You never saw him again. Tonight, someone else asks to sit in it. You hesitate, but nod. They lower themselves gently. Their shoulders loosen. They let out a sigh that had clearly been waiting for weeks. You say nothing. The chair will do the listening now. Let's take a detour. In a minor temple near Ostia, a chair was carved from volcanic rock and placed beneath a fresco of Mercury. No offerings, no prayers, just a seat. Locals believed sitting there for 10 minutes cured worry. Historians call it superstition. But who are historians to measure silence? Back to now. The guest in the chair begins to speak. Not loudly, not directly, just soft sentences of failed romance, a forgotten sibling, a memory of figs on a hot roof. The room doesn't hush them. It doesn't need to. This is the kind of truth that makes its own silence. Sir walks behind the chair once, pauses, looks at you, then moves on. Message received. When the guest finally stands, they seem taller, not by height, by lightness. They thank you. But you know better. They mean the chair. You smooth its cushion, pat it twice, and whisper, because it feels right, thank you. It does not squeak, it never does. But you think, just for a moment, you feel it breathe. Let's end here. Some say wisdom lives in scrolls. Others say it's passed in stories or pressed into coins. But maybe, just maybe, sometimes wisdom sits quiet, ready, waiting for someone to trust it with the truth. The guest who brought nothing. He arrives quietly, no scroll under his arm, no jar of olives, no pouch of dates wrapped in linen, just himself. No sandals, even just bare feet, dusty and tired, like he walked farther than most would for an evening of soft wine and murmured stories. When the curtain lifts and he steps in, no one gasps. No music stops. No flame flickers. And yet, something shifts, as if the room exhales differently with him in it. You greet him with a nod. He returns it. Doesn't bow. Doesn't fumble for words or gifts or excuses. Just stands eyes scanning the space like someone looking for a memory they aren't sure belongs to them. Then softly, thank you for having me. Let's pause here. Romans loved ceremony, offerings, gifts that gleamed and smelled expensive. A guest bringing nothing, that was rare, often frowned upon, unless what they brought was themselves, completely, unapologetically, unadorned. He chooses the floor, not a cushion, not a chair. He sits near the window where the breeze slides through the shutters curling around his shoulders like a borrowed cloak. Sir approaches, sniffs his toes, circles once, then curls beside him. Another silent approval. Let's talk about presents. Some guests arrive like trumpet flourishes. They demand your attention. Others, they arrive like dusk, quiet, unavoidable, transformative. He is the second kind. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it sounds like the inside of a cave that's held secrets for too long. He tells a short story about a river drying too early, about a fisherman who taught him how to wait, about olives that taste like regret. You don't interrupt, none of you do, because his words fall like coins into deep water, and all you want is to listen for the splash. Someone offers him wine. He smiles, declines. I'm already full, he says, and somehow you believe him. Let's drift to a historical aside. There's a Roman tale, half myth, half lesson, about a man who never brought gifts to banquets. People mocked him, whispered behind his back, but every time he attended, arguments ceased. Children slept easier, fires burned longer, and when he left, the hosts always felt better. Eventually, they stopped questioning what he brought because they realized what he left behind. Back to now. He leans back against the wall, closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them again, the room is quieter, softer. A candle near the archway burns more steadily. Someone near the hearth starts humming, low and lovely. No one knows why, but no one stops. He stays only a short while, maybe an hour, maybe a little more. Then, just as gently as he arrived, he rises. You walk him to the door, still barefoot, still with that odd grace of someone who belongs more to time than to place. At the threshold, he turns, says only, sometimes the emptiest hands carry the heaviest truths. Then he disappears into the evening, swallowed by stars and citrus-scented air. Later, after the guests have gone and the cushions remember where they belong, you find something near where he sat. A single fig, unripe, but perfectly shaped. You don't eat it. You don't move it. You just smile. Because even those who bring nothing always leave something behind. The shadow that stayed too long. The guests have gone. The cushions are puffed, the cups stacked, the last of the oil lamps dimmed to a respectful flicker. Sir is asleep in a patch of moonlight paws, twitching from whatever secret dream he's chasing. You move through the space slowly. It's the sacred part of the evening, the lull between company and solitude, where the house belongs only to breath and memory and wax, cooling into stillness. And then you see it, a shadow. At first you think it's yours. You pause, shift. The light shifts too. But this one, it does not. It clings to the archway like it's decided it belongs. Long, bent, not quite human, but not human either. It shouldn't be there, but it is. Let's pause and talk of Roman superstition. The Romans believed in umbra shadows of the dead, not ghosts exactly, not malicious, just lingering impressions, footprints of presence, the bits of soul, too stubborn or too sentimental to leave. They were said to follow those who told stories too well, who laughed too loudly, who remembered too much. People like you. You blink, the shadow doesn't. You step forward, it does not retreat. It's not cold, it doesn't speak, it doesn't even move. But you know it, knows you've seen it, and now it is waiting. Let's be clear, this isn't horror, this isn't fright. It's more like being watched by your own past, like bumping into a thought you meant to forget. Sir stirs, looks up, stares straight at the shadow, and oddly doesn't react. Not a hiss, not a growl, just a quiet blink. You whisper. You see it too. Sir doesn't answer, but he doesn't leave either. You approach slowly. It doesn't flinch. You speak softly, like you're addressing a former version of yourself. You've stayed longer than you should. Nothing. You're not part of the party anymore. Still nothing. And then finally, a shift, not in shape, in feeling. The air thickens, then lightens, like the end of a deep sigh. And the shadow steps away from the wall just once, and then evaporates. No drama, no wind, just gone. Let's wander to a historical side path. In some Roman homes, walls were painted with scenes of banquets where shadows attended, figures painted in darker hues, no features, always near the corners. Some believed they were the memories of previous gatherings. Others claimed they were painted in advance for guests who hadn't yet arrived or would never leave. Back to now. You exhale, touch the wall where the shadow stood. It's warm, not haunted, not hallowed, just human, as if someone once leaned there often and the stone never forgot the weight. You whisper thank you for coming, but you may go now. Sir returns to sleep. The moon has moved on, and so have you. Tomorrow, you might wonder if it really happened. But tonight, you know, some shadows are not cast. They're kept until they're ready to let go. The tray that knew where to go. It's just a tray, wooden, plain, sanded smooth around the edges where countless fingers have gripped, lifted, and passed it along. No inlay, no inscription, not even a maker's mark. But it always knows where to go. You first noticed it years ago during a spring gathering. A guest reached for a cup that hadn't been poured yet. Before you could move, the tray had already been set in front of them. By whom? No one remembers. But there it was. Olives, figs, exactly what was needed. Since then, you've learned to trust it. You load it gently, let it rest on the edge of a table, and sure enough, it finds its moment. Whether you carry it or someone else does, it ends up in the right hands, even when you don't remember placing it there. Let's pause for a detail from Roman daily life. Serving trays were common in Roman homes, often carved from olive wood, sometimes adorned with tiny bronze feet. But the best ones, they were passed down seasoned not just by oil and age, but by attention. The trays that knew the household, that adjusted themselves over time, that learned silently where to rest. Tonight, the tray holds nothing fancy, just warm bread wrapped in linen, a small bowl of goat cheese with cracked pepper, a sprig of thyme because it looked sad on the windowsill and deserved to be included. You set it on the edge of the marble counter, turn away to light a candle, and when you turn back, it's gone. Not stolen, not forgotten, just moved. You glance across the room. There it is, balanced perfectly on a guest's knee. Their expression is soft, surprised. They hadn't asked, but they'd been hungry, and the tray had known. Sir wanders over, sniffs the corner. He's not interested in the food. He's curious about the tray itself. He nudges it once, then curls beside it. An endorsement. You sit across the room and just watch. It gets passed gently, never dropped, never scraped. Like it asks without asking to be treated kindly. And people listen, even those who knock over goblets or tear napkins too loudly handle the tray with reverence. Let's meander to a curious detail. In a minor villa excavated near Paestum, a wooden tray was found buried beneath the kitchen tiles, perfectly preserved, etched faintly along the rim, for hands that remember hunger. Some believe it was ceremonial. Others say it belonged to a servant who never forgot what it meant to go without. Some objects carry not just food, but history. Back in your room, the tray finishes its rounds. Someone sets it gently on the ledge beside the lantern. You don't ask them to, they just do. Like the tray told them where it preferred to wait. You approach. Run your fingers along the grain. There are tiny ridges, memories of small burns, dropped seeds, a sliver missing from the corner. But it still holds everything, like it always has. You whisper to it half playfully, "Thank you." And though it's absurd, you feel like it hears you. Sir blinks from the shadows, yawns, then hops lightly onto the tray. It doesn't tip. Of course it doesn't. It adjusts, welcomes him, a final delivery perhaps. Because sometimes service is not about orders or duties. It's about knowing where to be. Before anyone else knows they need you there. The game no one won. It begins the way it always does. Someone picks up the little carved box from the shelf near the doorway, brushes the dust from the lid, opens it with a soft creak like a yawn from an ancient tree. Inside, 12 flat discs, a knotted cord, 3 pieces of polished bone, and a board etched with faded lines older than memory, older even than the house itself. Someone always says, "Wait, how does this work?" Again. And someone else replies, "We'll remember as we play." They don't. They never do. But that's not the point. This is the game no one wins. Not because they lose, but because winning was never the goal. Let's explore the pieces. The discs are all mismatched, some painted, some plain, some chipped like teeth from stories too wild to tame. The cord has a knot no one can undo. That knot's always been there, a riddle in string form. The bones, no one knows their origin. Too small for goat, too smooth for fish, too perfect for accident. They click when you roll them, like a tiny conversation you're not invited to translate. Sir loves the game. He doesn't play it, he interrupts it. He waits until the moment of greatest suspense, then pounces on the board, sending the discs scattering like startled birds. Everyone groans, someone laughs, and the game begins again. There are no rules, there are no scores, only this. Take turns, make stories, move pieces until you forget who's who. Let's pause here. Ancient Romans had dozens of games, dice made of bone, boards carved into stone steps in marketplaces. Some were for gambling, some for war simulation. But every now and then, a game would surface that wasn't for anything. Just a gathering of movement and noise and ritual, a shared space, a passing of time too gentle to measure. Tonight, the game is played again. The room hums with sleepy voices and half-serious strategy. "I'll trade you a red disc for that corner space." That's not how it works. Says, who says the not? Everyone laughs. The candlelight makes the bones shine like pearls. The pieces clatter, slide, clink. Someone invents a new rule. Another breaks it instantly. A guest declares themselves the shadow emperor of the upper quadrant. No one objects. Titles are temporary. Joy is not. Sir eventually bats one of the discs under the couch. Everyone mourns it for 5 seconds, then uses a piece of lemon rind in its place. Adaptation, the oldest rule of all. Let's wander again. There's a theory by a minor philosopher, long since forgotten, who claimed the gods play their own game. Every century they pick mortals as pieces, not to punish, not to reward, just to observe, to remind themselves what it means to not know the rules and still keep playing. Back to your house. Someone finally says, I think that's enough. The pieces are gathered, the cord coiled, the board wiped gently as if dusting off a memory. No winner, no loser, just the satisfaction of something ancient being repeated. You place the box back on its shelf. Sir hops up beside it, guarding it like a shrine. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. But you both understand. This was not a game of chance, or skill, or victory. It was a game of togetherness. And tonight, that's the kind of win everyone needs. The song that only played once. It didn't come from a lyre, or a flute, or the little harp by the window that always has one string slightly too loose. No, this song came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It began while you were lighting the last of the lamps, a soft hum like breath through hollow bone, then a whisper of melody, tentative, delicate, full of pauses, like it was remembering itself in real time. You froze, not from fear, from recognition, because you'd never heard it before, and somehow it still felt like home. Sir perked up instantly. His ears flicked toward the ceiling, then the floor, then the corners of the room where no instrument lived. He didn't move. He just listened. So did you. Let's pause here. The Romans loved music. They had hydraulic water organs. They played panpipes, horns, and curved trumpets that coiled like sleeping serpents. But they also believed in divine music. Music that wasn't written or learned, but given. Played once, never repeated, a gift. Tonight felt like that. The melody grew fuller, richer, still faint, still drifting like steam through old stone. But now it had rhythm, the kind of rhythm that matches memory. The flicker of torchlight, the drip of olive oil, the cadence of footsteps pacing just outside your door. It didn't sound like music you'd dance to. It sounded like music you'd remember waking up to in another life. The guests heard it too. You could tell. No one asked who was playing. They just stopped speaking, as if the air asked for silence in return. Someone near the window closed their eyes and cried without realizing. Another guest sat down slowly, holding their cup without drinking. No one moved, no one dared, because this song, it knew them. Sir walked toward the hearth and sat directly in the center of the rug. He tilted his head once, and then the melody began to fade, not abruptly, like a dream leaving gently backward. First, the hum disappeared, then the higher notes, then that one low tone that pulsed like a heartbeat, and then nothing. Let's drift to a historical detail. In a scroll recovered from Herculaneum, there's a single sentence written in the margin of a philosophy lecture. A song passed through the bathhouse. No instrument was seen, no tune could be recalled, but for 3 days the water felt warmer. Some songs don't need a second verse. Back in your home, someone finally breaks the silence. They whisper, "Did anyone?" But don't finish the sentence. No one answers, not because they're confused, because they know what's just happened and don't want to break the magic by naming it. The evening continues, but gently. Voices quieter, movements slower. Even laughter feels rounder at the edges, as if everyone's body remembered the tune, even if their minds had already forgotten. You light one more lamp, just to make sure the house knows you appreciated the song. Sir brushes against your ankle and disappears behind the curtain. You never hear it again. Not the next night, not the next month, not ever. But sometimes, when you're slicing fruit or folding linens or sitting alone by the window, you catch a shape of it, not a sound, a rhythm, like the walls inhaling, like a story forming just behind your thoughts. And you smile, because the best songs, they play once and then echo forever in the spaces you keep quiet just for them. The recipe that wasn't written. You don't have it in a scroll. You don't have it on a wax tablet. You don't even have it scribbled on the back of a wine jar with charcoal and hope. But every now and then, you make it. It begins the same way, with a longing, not for a flavor, but for a feeling. Tonight, that feeling smells like lemon and warm grain and something slightly burnt, but in a good way. So you begin. You don't measure. You don't time. You don't even really think. You just move. A pinch of something dry. A splash of something sharp. A stir until your wrist aches. But in that satisfying ancient way, like you're unlocking an ancestral door. Sir watches from the corner. He always knows when you're making that dish. Let's pause here. The Romans wrote down plenty of recipes, especially in Apicius, the most famous ancient cookbook. But the best dishes, the ones passed by hand from person to person. They lived in the body, not the page. They were taught in kitchens, not forums. Shared in steam, not ink. The pot sizzles. Something sticks to the bottom, but you don't scrape it. You know better. That crust. It's the memory. The proof that heat and time shook hands and made something real. A guest peeks in. They don't ask what you're cooking. They just say, "It smells like home." You nod. But you don't know which home they mean, and neither do they. That's the point. You crush something in your palm, coriander, fennel, whatever was on the shelf that reminded you of salt air and second chances. Sprinkle it like a secret. Sir sneezes. You thank him for the blessing. Let's drift again. In a kitchen excavated near Pompeii, archaeologists found a hearth with remnants of a stew. They couldn't identify all the ingredients, but they found fingerprints on the rim of the pot. Small, likely female, maybe a cook, maybe a child helping. The fingerprints were more useful than any recipe because they told the truth. This dish wasn't written, it was remembered. Back in your home, the dish is nearly done. It doesn't look like last time. That one was thicker, more bitter, made on a night you were feeling braver. This one is softer, sweeter, made on a night you're feeling a little lost. The food understands. You scoop it into a bowl, offer a bit to Sir. He sniffs, walks away. That means it's for humans. A guest takes a bite, then pauses, then closes their eyes. You don't ask if they like it, you just wait. After a moment, they open their eyes and whisper, "My grandmother made this." You nod, but you know she didn't. What she made was hers. This is yours, but somehow the flavors remembered her too. You make the dish only once in a while, never when asked, only when called, by smell, by weather, by an ache in your ribs that says, "Make something real tonight." When you're done, you wash the pot slowly, no rush. The warmth of the water reminds you that cooking isn't about perfection. It's about tending, not just to the food, but to yourself. Sir returns as you dry your hands, brushes against your leg, then hops onto the warm counter. You pat him gently. Neither of you says a word. Because some recipes aren't made with instructions. They're made with care. And care doesn't need to be written down to last. The door that never closed the same way twice. It's not a grand door, not carved, not gilded, no lion-shaped knockers or creaking iron hinges that groan with dramatic intent. Just a simple wooden door, pine probably, soft-grained, a bit warped from years of weather and wandering hands. And yet, every time you close it closes differently. Sometimes it sighs, a long, contented exhale like it's relieved to be shut for the night. Other times, it clicks softly like it's tucking secrets under its latch. And once, just once, it sang, not in notes, not in tune, but in tone, a single resonant hum, like it struck some hidden chord between this world and the next. Sir heard it too. He froze ears, sharp tail still, then blinked slowly as if to say, I heard it too. Let it be. Let's drift into history for a moment. Roman doors were made of oak or elm, sometimes faced with bronze. They weren't just entrances. They were thresholds, spaces where gods watched, where spirits lingered, where offerings were left. There were gods for hinges, gods for thresholds, even gods for the act of knocking. Doors weren't just wood and nails. They were decisions. Your door is quiet tonight. No guests coming, no wind in the trees. You close it gently, and it resists just a little, like it wants to say something. You pause, wait, then try again. This time it closes with a soft tap, like a polite reminder, not locked, not sealed. Just, are you sure? Sir rubs against the frame. His whiskers twitch like antennae. He's always been attuned to the door's moods. Sometimes he avoids it. Sometimes he stares at it like it's about to speak. He knows things aren't always what they seem. You think of all the times this door has opened, to friends, to strangers, to forgotten packages and sudden rain. Each time it let something in, and each time it closed, it kept something out, but never the same way twice. Let's consider a strange Roman belief, that doors remember. Some Romans believed that doors, especially those in old houses, held a trace of every farewell ever spoken across their threshold, a kind of wood-bound memory. They said if you pressed your ear to a well-worn door at night, you might hear echoes of old goodbyes. You try it, just for fun. You press your ear gently to the door, and for a moment, nothing. Then faint as silk, unraveling a whisper. Not words, just a tone, low, warm, like someone saying good night without moving their lips. You step back, smiling, grateful. Sir taps the door once with his paw. It doesn't open. Of course not. It knows better. You leave the lamp burning low, not for the room, not even for yourself, but for the door, a soft light just in case it needs to see where it stands, because not all doors are barriers. Some are listeners, some are watchers, some are participants in your quiet rituals of closing, opening, staying, going. And this door, it's always listened, even if it never closes quite the same way twice. The clock that didn't count time. It doesn't tick, it doesn't chime, it doesn't even have hands. But it's a clock. At least that's what you've always called it. And somehow, despite its silence, despite its refusal to do what clocks are meant to do, it still works. Just not the way you expect. It hangs in the hallway, circular, bronze, worn in the way that speaks of time not just passing, but settling. Inside the glass is not a face of numbers. There are no numerals, no markings, just a slow swirling of something golden, like dust, caught in the sunlight, endlessly turning inward, sometimes clockwise, sometimes not, sometimes still. Sir watches it often. He'll sit across from it, tail curled neatly, staring at the center, as if it holds the answer to a question he hasn't quite formed. You've joined him more than once. Neither of you ever speaks. It feels wrong to interrupt. Let's drift briefly into history. The Romans had sundials, water clocks, sand timers. They marked hours with bells, with torch lengths, even with shadows cast by temples. But there were also objects, not quite tools, not quite toys, that tracked something other. A philosopher once described a device that marked the weight of a moment rather than its measure. No sketches remain, just the phrase. It did not count what passed, it revealed what lingered. Back to your clock. Tonight, you walk past it and stop. Something in your chest, soft and sudden, tells you to listen. Not with ears, with awareness. The dust inside is moving faster than usual, swirling like a storm, but silently. You step closer and realize something extraordinary. The swirling matches your breath. You inhale, it slows. You exhale, it expands. Not perfectly, not precisely, but attentively. As if this clock doesn't count time, it counts presence. You sit beneath it, back against the wall. Sir joins you as he always does when things become unspoken, and you watch together. The movement eases, then slows, then stills, not because anything has ended, but because you've arrived fully, and that, it seems, is what this clock was always waiting for. Let's linger in a side detail. There's a mosaic fragment found in a villa north of Ostia. It shows a hand holding a circular object. Inside the circle, not ours, but small birds, a sleeping eye, a flame. Scholars debate whether it's a symbol for memory or breath or both. You wonder if your clock is the same, not an object that measures what you lose, but what you bring. Every quiet moment, every deep breath, every thought that passes like a boat on a still river. It holds them, doesn't judge them, doesn't rank them, just remembers. You rise finally. Place your palm gently on the frame. It's warm, always is. Sir nudges your knee, then walks ahead, leading you back into the softer corners of the house. You don't look back at the clock. You don't need to. You already know it's not marking the minutes you've left behind. It's holding the space for the ones you've lived well. The goodbye that took its time. It doesn't begin with a door closing, or a suitcase packed, or a hand raised in farewell. It begins with a silence, a knowing, a hush that moves through the house like the first cool wind of early autumn. It doesn't rush in. It arrives on tiptoe. Tonight feels different. You can feel it in your bones, warm but slightly heavier. You can feel it in the corners of the room, still but slightly expectant. Even Sir is quieter than usual. He's curled up near the hearth paws tucked beneath him, eyes half lidded, like he knows what's coming and has already made peace with it. There are no guests tonight, only the hum of the oil lamp, the soft shuffle of your slippers across stone, the distant echo of your own thoughts unfolding like paper cranes in the dark. You walk through the rooms one last time, not to check or adjust, but to thank. The windows that welcomed stars, the cups that held laughter, the pillows that caught the dreams of strangers and returned them gently to daylight. You touch the tray that always knew where to go. Run your fingers along the edge of the table where games were played without rules. Pause by the curtain that once shimmered in the light of a song heard only once. Goodbyes in the Roman world were sacred. The word veil meant more than farewell. It meant be strong, because parting was not just a moment. It was a transition, a portal from what has been to what waits patiently on the other side. You light one more candle, not out of need, but as a small ceremony, the kind that says, this happened. It mattered. I was here. Sir rises finally. He stretches, walks to your side, rubs against your calf with the slow, deliberate weight of a final punctuation mark. There's no announcement, no final toast, just the gentle closing of a book you've loved too long to ever truly finish. You stand at the doorway, not quite leaving, not quite staying, and whisper a phrase you whispered to so many others. Thank you. To the air, to the walls, to the dust motes that carried your words when your voice was too tired. And they whisper back, not in sound, but in stillness, a stillness that holds everything you've ever shared, every story, every dish, every game, every flame, every glance exchanged between you and Sir and the world that passed through your home. You step outside. The stars are bright, but not intrusive. The moon is full but gentle. Sir follows, no leash, no command. Just trust. You don't lock the door. You don't need to. It knows how to close itself in its own way on its own time, just like everything else here. Because not all goodbyes are endings. Some are just quiet handoffs from memory to myth, from routine to reverence, from what was to what waits. Final passage. Word count 300. The house is quiet now, but it still holds your breath, still holds your steps in the grain of the floorboards, the scent of citrus in the walls, the echo of laughter under the eaves. You walk away slowly, not because you're reluctant, but because slowness honors meaning. Sir walks beside you. His tail flicks once like punctuation on a poem that no longer needs editing. You don't look back, not because you've forgotten, but because you've remembered enough. The world waits. The next story waits. But this one ends here, not in silence, but in softness, like a candle that knows exactly when to go out. Even the oldest tales have something new to say if we listen gently. May this moment of quiet carry you through the night like a soft breeze through open windows. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.
In the silent winter night, as the last flicker of candlelight in the thatched cottage dimmed and a sliver of moonlight slipped through the uneven roof, the damp straw below glimmered faintly in silver. From outside came the soft clucks of hens settling into their nests and the whisper of the wind stirring the wooden beams. Amidst that worn, golden straw lay an infant swaddled in a warm strip of yellow cloth, lips pressed together in slumber within the humble stable. Beside the manger knelt a man in a green tunic, eyes alight with equal measures of worry and wonder. Two women knelt nearby, their forms shadowed against the darkness, one clutching a white hen to her chest, the other pressing her hand gently to her pregnant belly. Above them, a circular carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood crowned the rafters, lending an almost sacred hush to the moment. It was as if heaven and earth held their breath, waiting to witness a miraculous destiny just beginning to unfold. Chapter 1. A dawn in the straw-filled stable. In the faint glow of the lone oil lamp hanging from a rafter, the small thatched cottage beside the village lay in a profound stillness, as though nothing extraordinary were about to take place. A chilly winter wind crept into the gaps in the roof, carrying with it the mingled scent of fresh hay and damp, moldy undertones from recent days of drizzle. On the cold, damp ground inside the stable, patches of dry straw clung to the feathers of the chickens, evidence of the relentless, persistent rain. Outside on the low-hanging eaves, hens, roosters, and chicks waited patiently for the downpour to finally cease, pecking at bits of grain amid the straw. A sliver of waning moonlight shone down as a silvery carpet, making the scattered straw shimmer like a field of golden embers. Amid the damp straw, resting in an old wooden manger, lay an infant swaddled snugly in a warm, pale golden cloth. Only the infant's serene, sleeping face was visible, a tiny bud of life glowing softly against the rugged backdrop of the stable. From outside came the distant echo of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of straw shifting as the chickens scratched about. A man with deep olive-green eyes and a tall, lean frame knelt beside the manger, clad in a long tunic of forest green and a muted gray-green cloak. He pressed his hands together in prayer, his gaze tenderly fixed on the child. Under the dim lamplight, his face bore the lines of worry shaded by a profound, unspoken joy. To his left, near the stable's edge, knelt two women determined to find peace in this lonely night. One wore a warm reddish-orange dress with a pale yellow headscarf wrapped tightly around her head. Her hands rested gently on her abdomen as though she felt the child's heartbeat mirrored in her own. The second woman, clad in a deep indigo gown with a simple white linen veil over her head, cradled a white hen in her arms, as though even the family's fowl deserved protection in the chill air. Her thin arms clutched the hen's soft feathers, evoking an image both delicate and resolute. High atop the stable's gabled roof, a small circular carving depicted a mother hen sheltering her brood, a quiet symbol of guardianship and protection that seemed to bless the humble scene below. Amid the silence of the night, broken only by the wind's soft moan and the patter of straw, the tableau felt both utterly ordinary, like a rural farm scene, and mysteriously sacred, as if lifted from the pages of a medieval, illuminated manuscript. The world beyond the stable's walls seemed to vanish, leaving only the hush of the family's vigil. No one could yet know what fate awaited the child drifting peacefully in that manger. In this moment, however, wrapped in the straw and candlelight, the newborn represented new hope. To the man kneeling, his weathered features alight with fatherly devotion, the child was a promise. He vowed that this tiny life would be protected with every ounce of his devotion. The two women, though bearing the weariness of the world on their shoulders, knelt in quiet prayer, trusting that this child would somehow thrive despite the hardships. Chapter 2. The Journey Home. The next morning, the first light of spring trickled through the cracked plaster of the small cottage, casting golden beams across the damp flagstones of the narrow path leading to an arched courtyard gate. The cock's crowing was joined now by the laughter and chatter of children playing in the village below. Inside the humble stable, the green-clad man from the night before stood expectantly at the wooden doorway, his eyes flicking with concern as a small procession of strangers approached. At their forefront walked a young nobleman wearing a burnt-orange cloak edged with forest green trim. Beneath it, he sported a green tunic finely embroidered at the cuffs, and he cradled a heavy leather-bound book beneath one arm. Beside him, a handmaiden in a flowing jade gown carried a bundle of straw in her arms, bowing respectfully to the man in the doorway. The young noble spoke in a calm, measured tone, his dark beard neatly trimmed. "We have received word that a young woman has given birth in dire poverty in a nearby hamlet. We wish, if it pleases you, to be taken to this place so we may bear witness ourselves." The green-clad man's expression changed instantly, shifting from concern to guarded curiosity. The memory of the straw-lined manger from hours before flickered in the noble's eyes. With a steady nod, the man gestured for them to enter the small house, where a thin woman lay resting on a rough wooden bed against the far wall. Pale morning light filtered in through the arched doorway behind her, revealing the exhaustion etched into her face. She stirred as the noble and his entourage stepped in. It was the mother of the newborn from the stable. Through a croak in her throat, she addressed the noble as he approached. "My lord, if you have come for that child." "I hardly know how to explain. I gave birth in this straw-filled stable alone. My parents have long since passed, and the child's father abandoned me once he learned I was expecting. I have managed alone, without a coin to my name, just as you see." The green-clad man moved to her side, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My lord," he implored the noble, "pray do not dismiss us entirely. We are but poor folk who have endured hardship and illness. If you find no value in the child, we will gratefully accept your mercy to care for its mother and kin." The young noble gave a half-smile, placing a hand on the mother's quilt. Then, his gaze drifted to the small bundle of golden straw in the corner, recalling the child's warm breath in the darkness. He exhaled slowly and said, "I do not relish empty superstitions, but if this child was born in such a most unusual place, then perhaps there is something extraordinary within him. We will take him to the northern keep. There the wise and learned may confirm whether he bears any divine mark. Until then, attend to his mother and him, and keep them safe." The green-clad man bowed his head and pressed the noble's hand gratefully. "We thank your grace. If the child bears no gift, show us mercy. If so, we trust in your compassion." With that, the noble turned to his handmaiden. "You two go ahead and guide them. I will follow close behind. Bring medicinal herbs, dried bread, and a few hens so the mother and child have sustenance on the road." They departed along the winding country lane, the man with the infant cradled in his arms, the cold breeze stirring the mother's hair and the edges of the weathered cloth that wrapped the baby. The child slept soundly, oblivious to the forested hills and misty swamps they passed, unaware that he slumbered so near the edge of destiny. Before the noble could leave the small dwelling, the green-clad man knelt once more at the threshold of the stable and bowed his head. "Thank you, your grace. May heaven bear witness to our gratitude." A final sob from the mother, echoing against the tattered wooden walls, followed the traveling party as they melted into the countryside. Chapter 3: Discovery at the Mistbound Keep. The journey spanned many leagues across fields dotted with ancient oak trees, their skeletal branches clattering in the harsh spring wind. Rays of grayish sunlight fractured through shifting banks of mist, momentarily draping the land in silver. Atop a gentle rise stood the craggy keep, its stone walls coated in greenish moss, with a turret poking skyward like the tip of a spear aimed at the clouds. Its great oak doors, heavy and cracked, sat closed as if challenging anyone to enter. When the procession arrived, the imposing gates creaked open under the touch of guards clad in polished chainmail. Their helmets caught the pale dawn light as they formed a silent aisle leading the travelers into a vast paved courtyard. A small fountain gurgled faintly at its center, the water falling in delicate arcs as though testing the chill air. Stained glass windows, depicting saints and biblical scenes, cast kaleidoscopic reflections across the flagstones. Inside the great hall, the noble, now flanked by advisors and officials, stood before a marble dais, the carved dragons and phoenixes on its edges gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Portraits on the walls recounted epic voyages and holy miracles. One image unmistakably showed a child laid in a manger scene, mirroring the very scene that brought them here. The noble spoke with steely composure. "We have brought this child, whom rumor claims was born amidst animals in a humble stable, to this place. Let learned men and women examine him. Should he possess any divine mark, make it known. If not, we shall return him to his mother, and end this matter." An elder statesman presided from a seat of honor. His gray hair framed a face carved by years of governance and prayer. "Very well," he replied in a gravelly voice. "Summon our wisest physicians, astrologers, and spiritual guides." In bygone ages, text spoke of children born under a waning moon in such humble settings as forebears of great change. We shall confirm whether this child is touched by providence or simply a peasant's offspring. After a respectful nod from the noble, attendants escorted the mother and child into a small side chamber. The mother perched herself on a narrow bed, hugging her bundle closely, while the attending surgeon, an aging man with sunken eyes and ink-stained fingertips, prepared his instruments of glass and metal. He inspected the baby's face, feeling for pulses, mapping each freckle and vein. "Born on such a night, with the moon low and the stars arranged thus," he mumbled, tracing a quill across parchment. "The child carries the sign of the celestial radiance. Yet his flesh bears no blemish nor weakness, save an uncommon warmth beneath his skin." The mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Surely you do not subscribe to mere superstition." "He is my son, and I will protect him." The physician, eyes glinting in intrigue, waved his hand. "I rely not on superstition but on prognosis and study. Yet this child's reaction to my salves is unexpected." He uncovered a small bowl of herbal decoction and dabbed a smudge to the child's brow. The mother stifled a gasp as a faint blush rose and then dissipated from the baby's skin within heartbeats. "Remarkable," he said softly. "His resistance is beyond mortal. He may live through the harshest winter. Plague might pass him by as if he were touched by something extraordinary." Meanwhile, a group of venerable monks had gathered in a circle outside the chamber, chanting prayers in hushed tones. Their voices echoed through the marble corridors, each syllable a plea for the child's well-being. The fragrance of incense swirled in the air as they burned frankincense in the smoke wreathed around the pillars, imparting a sense of solemnity as though heaven were itself leaning in to listen. Chapter 4: Sacred Care and Divine Imagery. The next morning, the child was placed in a chamber adorned with draperies of deep teal and crimson, the walls painted in motifs of cherubic angels and swirling vines. A soft rug of scarlet lay underfoot, offering warmth against the stone. The mother, her robes now exchanged for finer linens, sat close at her son's side, while the nobleman hovered near the door, anxiety etched on his face. The child, now cradled on a bed of golden straw within a small alcove painted in shades of greenish blue, stirred as though sensing the swirl of incense and candlelight. A holy sister, her head unshrouded and framed by a faint golden halo, knelt beside him, cradling him gently. Her gown of deep crimson spilled around her knees, white undersleeves hugging her wrists. As she fed the child from a simple clay bowl, the faint glow of the halo glinted off her serene features, and villagers murmured prayers of gratitude. Outside the alcove, a woman in a cerulean gown edged with white stood holding a basket brimming with bread and fruits. She smiled at the child's mother, then edged forward, offering sustenance. Meanwhile, a cluster of white and gray hens scratched in the straw-laden floor, pecking at stray grains as though drawn by the hush of holiness. Behind them, the walls glowed a muted gold, adorned with circular medallions showing saintly faces, each encircled by delicate filigree and ochre tones. Soft candlelight danced upon the mosaic floor, making the mosaics seem to shimmer like dust-kissed fireflies in the dusk. Outside the alcove's door, villagers knelt in silence, farmers and simple craftsmen, their weathered hands folded in reverence. They came bearing humble offerings, bowls of porridge, jars of honey, hand-woven cloth to shield the child from winter's chill. In this moment, even a modest henhouse within the keep became a sacred space where life and devotion converged in gentle harmony. Chapter 5. Teaching and a Brewing Crisis. Following the child's initial examinations, he was moved to a small, quiet chamber hung with tapestries illustrating scenes of compassion and mercy. The mother slept on a modest bed of carved wood and soft linens, comforted at last by better garments and a sense of security. The child, who was now old enough to perceive, began each day with lessons in basic scripture and morality, his little hands tracing the curves of ancient runes upon parchment as novice monks guided him in simple prayers. Outside, however, a creeping unease spread through the keep and its surrounding villages. A sudden outbreak of plague swept through the outer hamlets, claiming the elderly and the infirm. As rumors of pestilence and catastrophe reached the keep, an ominous whisper took shape that the child, born under miraculous signs, was himself a harbinger of doom, or worse, a demonic pawn. A faction of courtiers, far more interested in their own narrow ambitions than any child's safety, began spreading malicious rumors. One evening, as the candles flickered low in the dim corridors, the young noble was confronted by a veiled messenger bearing an ominous warning. If that child lives, your influence wanes, your grace. If he truly possesses celestial power, you will be cast aside and your name reviled. The noble's jaw clenched in frustration. He retorted, voice quivering with resolve. I do not wish to harm a child, but if I must protect him at all costs, I will. Such slander has no basis. Meanwhile, the chapel's aged abbot and his acolytes worked tirelessly to keep hope alive. Their gentle chants echoed through stone naves, candles reflecting off stained glass depictions of angels guiding lost souls. The abbot implored the noble. We must guard the boy. These slanders spring from fear and ignorance. Let me lead a procession of prayer and light to shield him. But the noble, haunted by threats of betrayal and power struggles, responded with weary frustration. Every day brings new peril. If I do nothing, conspiracies grow bolder. Save the boy first, then quell the treachery. Thus did the keep's hushed tranquility fracture, replaced by overlapping currents of devotion and dread. Chapter 6. A Night of Desperate Struggle. In the farthest chamber of the keep, a dim, narrow room where a single candle sputtered, sat the mother, her son nestled in her arms, both swathed in fine wool to ward off the night's chill. The plague's ghostly shadow hovered beyond the stone walls, and the mother, haggard and pale, often awoke in a panic, sure she'd lost him in her dreams. The baby rested peacefully, oblivious to the plotting that pulsed beyond the heavy oak door. In the dead of night, a figure draped in dark robes slipped into that very chamber. The candle's fluttering light revealed a hired assassin, a gaunt man with cruel eyes, slipping a small vial of poison into a clay cup. The mother stirred, sensing an intruder. Her heart hammered as she realized the man intended to harm her child. In one swift motion, she lunged from the bed, grabbing his arm. She strained to hold him, her nails digging into his wrist, as he tried to pull free. A whisper of steel sliced through the darkness. Another conspirator, waiting just outside, thrust a dagger through the crack in the door. The assassin let out a strangled cry as the blade found its mark. Blood spurted into the candlelight, staining the wooden floor. The mother, panic-stricken, clutched her son and screamed, her voice echoing through the silent halls. Outside, the alarm bells clanged with urgent clangs. Guards in chainmail, swords drawn, flooded the corridors. The plague's fear turned to fear of treachery as the clash of steel rang through the keep. Within moments, the 3 conspirators, 2 assassins, and the mysterious instigator were seized and bound. Though they had hoped to extinguish a life they deemed troublesome, they were instead caught in the violent throng of justice. The noble, awakened by the uproar, raced through the torchlit corridors. His boots thundered on flagstones still damp from the night's chill. Bursting into the chamber, he beheld the child's mother cradling her son, tears and sweat streaking her ashen cheeks. He dropped to his knees and gathered the infant into his arms, his face wrought with guilt. "I failed you both. I will not let this harm come again." Outside, the clash of guards drove the frightened conspirators into submission. But the noble's heart was already racing with new urgency. He realized the life of this child, so vulnerable, had become the fulcrum of his own destiny. Chapter 7. A Miracle of Light. Beyond the clamor of captivity, in the highest tower's inner sanctuary, the abbot and his monks gathered in prayer. Candles flickered in a cold, vaulted chamber as the abbot intoned incantations for protection and healing. Their voices formed a low, steady hum that resonated through the stone walls as though evoking solace from the ether itself. Outside, the keep's gates remained shut tight, unyielding to the plague that battered the land. Within the mother's chamber, as the fight waned, shouts faded to muffles, the candle's flame flared violently. The wax erupted in swirls of emerald and crimson fire, casting wild shadows across the walls. The newborn, tucked in his mother's loving arms, stirred, his little body glowing with a soft, aquamarine light. The mother's eyes widened in awe as she pressed her hand protectively over him, feeling warmth suffuse through her trembling fingers. At the window's sill, the gilded painting of a saintly visage. The very scene of the child's miraculous birth seemed to glow in step with the baby's luminous aura. The mother, overcome with wonder, murmured, "My child, what power dwells within you?" Below, the nobleman had sprinted to a high window. From this vantage, he watched the candles flare and witnessed the child bathed in that azure glow. A gasp escaped his lips. It is true, a miracle. In his mind's eye, possibilities unfurled like banners in the wind. If he truly carries this divine spark, I must guard him at all costs. Let no conspiracy snuff out this light. Back in the great hall, as rumors of the child's wondrous radiance spread, swords fell silent, cries of aggression died on the lips of soldiers. Every man at arms lowered his weapon, eyes lifted to the turret battlements, and a hush descended. Even the gloom-laden corridors felt an unexpected warmth, as if a transcendent presence stood in solidarity with the child and his mother. Chapter 8. Renewal and Reconciliation. After the glow receded, leaving only a gentle warmth in its wake, the infant returned to his mother's arms as though he had merely shifted in slumber. The mother wept softly, pressing his small face to her chest, grateful tears streaming into his hair. The noble, having rushed into the chamber, knelt before her, tears glistening in his eyes. He lifted the child and bowed low. "Forgive me, Mother. I failed in protecting him. But now I see. This child's destiny may be greater than any of us can fathom." The mother clasped her son tightly, a faint tear marking his cheek as she looked at the noble with solemn gratitude. He was a gift from heaven. I only sought to protect him. Below, in the great hall, the elder statesman and all the assembled courtiers and advisors knelt, their eyes shining with reverence. The elder's voice then boomed. "This is proof of divine presence. Any who doubt shall face consequences for accusing the innocent." The noble placed the infant gently on a cushioned dais. Reverently he turned to the gathering. "From this moment on, no harm shall come to him. Let him be taught of mercy and compassion." A chorus of applause rose, and the keep's residents from steward to serf cried out in celebration. Swayed by the miracle, the faction conspiring to destroy the child stepped forward, kneeling before the noble. With tears streamed down their faces, they confessed their calumnies and pledged loyalty anew. An elder monk then addressed the crowd. "Let us consecrate this child in prayer, so that he may grow in wisdom and empathy. If any still harbor malice, may divine justice turn them to righteousness." Roughly a year passed. Spring returned again, and the keep, once plagued and broken, now thrived with blooming orchards and golden fields. The child, now called Andreas, walked the halls, clad in a silk tunic of sky blue and gold embroidery. Crowned with the humble straw from his birthplace as a token, he offered blessings to all who came before him. Beneath the dais, bowls of chicken broth, herbal remedies, and freshly baked bread stood ready, laid out by grateful villagers. The boy's mother, now clad in a gleaming white robe, watched from a side dais, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "My child has fulfilled his purpose. He has shown us the meaning of faith." The noble, elevated now to the title Duke of Light's Vigil, stood behind the dais and addressed the statesman. "Your guidance and the monk's prayers saved him. He is our blessing." The statesman bowed deeply, his voice thick. "Andreas is heaven's messenger. In his presence, cruelty and fear dissolve." As music played throughout the keep, harps, lutes, flutes weaving melodies of hope, Andreas took a small harp. With a trembling child's voice, he sang 2 lines of verse. "In humble straw, life's ember glows. A light of love through winter's throes." Silence fell as every soul listened, then applause swelled as a tide. Children clapped in delight, elders wept in gratitude. The church bells rang out, and for a moment, all fear and discord seemed banished by that simple, shining truth. Chapter 9, A Peaceful Countryside Reimagined. A year later, fields of barley swayed beneath azure skies, the keep's sturdy walls eclipsed by blossoming cherry trees. Duke Andreas, now 5 years old, traveled with his parents through sunlit villages, distributing bread and healing herbs to the poor. He spoke with kindly eyes to every child, offering encouragement even to the most ailing. "Fear not, dear friend. Spring always returns." Villagers would weep with joy, kissing his hands, while farmers set fresh eggs and poultry by the roadside in thanks. Among them, hens pecked at stray grain, unconcerned by the noble procession. In the distance, a modest wooden shelter built atop a gentle knoll stood as a tribute to the innocent beginnings, a straw-lined manger next to a small coop. The Duke explained to his son, "Here is where you came from, a simple stable amidst the veldt. Remember that humility is the foundation of your heart." The boy nodded solemnly, stroking a young chick that nestled against his boot. He turned to his father. "I will not forget. Every life is precious." That evening, as the crimson sun sank behind the hills, the boy sat upon a straw bale, gazing at the vibrant glow. He closed his eyes and silently prayed, "Grant all your creatures peace. Let fear be banished and love endure." A soft breeze rustled the straw as if echoing his plea. At that moment, a flock of hens beneath the coop scattered in a flurry of feathers, then settled quietly once more, uneasy, perhaps, in the presence of such grace. The Duke glanced at his son, pride and wonder mixing in his eyes. "Your words are the balm the world needs." From that day forward, travelers spoke of the joyful Duke and the blessed child of the stable, and the once humble mound of straw blossomed into a place of pilgrimage. Pilgrims left baskets of poultry feed and straw at the manger, believing that in honoring Andreas's birthplace, they shared in his divine favor. Chapter 10, Legacy of the Manger. Seasons passed, and the Duke's realm thrived in prosperity. Under the steady guidance of Duke Andreas, famine and disease receded. Villagers cultivated their fields with renewed vigor. Children grew up learning from the Duke's teachings of compassion and humility. Each spring, a festival filled the hills with laughter. Costumed dancers imitated the pecking hens, musicians played lilting jigs, and families shared hearty stews of chicken and barley. At the heart of it all lay a small straw-lined manger, retained within a simple wooden shelter, its planks engraved with phrases of peace. Andreas, now a bright and eloquent 10-year-old, would stand in the center of the festival grounds, sharing his story in gentle verses. From humble straw, the light was born, a gift of grace on winter's morn. Villagers, from blacksmiths and bakers to weavers and shepherds, listened intently. They offered eggs, fresh herbs, and woven ribbons as tributes, symbols that all shared in the child's miracle. The Duke looked on, his silvering hair caught in the breeze, and knelt beside his son, pressing a father's kiss to Andreas's brow. He thought back to the night in that dark stable, how a newborn's prayer for mercy had reshaped an entire realm. The once hopeless cottage of straw had become the cornerstone of a legacy that transcended time. When times grew hard once more, storms flooding the fields, sickness descending on the elderly, the people rekindled their faith in the child's promise. They prayed at the straw-lined shelter, not because they expected magic to erase all suffering, but because they knew in their hearts that hope and unity could overcome any darkness. And so, the humble stable's memory endured, in every humble straw, in every clucking hen, in every child's bright eyes. People felt whisperings of Andreas's miracle, reminders that love and light can bloom in even the humblest of beginnings. Across generations, mothers told their children of the child of the manger, fathers shared the story by hearth fires. Each pilgrimage to the straw mound ended with a banquet of roasted poultry and barley bread, an act of thanksgiving for life's simple blessings. People of all stations, nobles and peasants alike, set aside their grievances to share in a common bond. The knowledge that from dire poverty and vulnerability could yet spring a force of compassion strong enough to change the world. In the end, the tiny infant who first opened his eyes under a tattered roof had sown the seeds of a new era, one where humility triumphed over pride, kindness triumphed over fear, and love triumphed over hatred. The flickering candle of that winter night remained alive in each heart, a steadfast flame guiding humankind through every storm. And thus, the legacy of the manger, born in an unassuming straw-filled stable, remained a testament to the enduring power of mercy and the miracle that, no matter how bleak, hope can shine forth in the darkest hour. Epilogue. Notes on the tale of the manger. This tale spans over 4,000 words in American English, tracing the narrative from the humble stable birth through the trials at the mistbound keep to the final flourishing inheritance of compassion. The storyline is drawn entirely from a detailed visual analysis of 5 critical images, each focusing on the stable setting, the color palette, the figure's attire, and the symbolism of divine light. It is intended that the legacy of the manger serve as a parable of faith, resilience, and the redemptive power of compassion, reminding readers that profound miracles often begin in the most unassuming places. End. Chapter 1. A warm straw stall in the midst of winter. At the threshold between night and dawn, when the sky was still pale from the lingering clouds hovering overhead, a chill wind from the north whispered through the gaps in the red-tiled roof of the cottage perched on the hillside. Inside that century-old, thatch-roofed home, where the faint strains of folk music still lingered from the main room, a lone candle flickered, casting a dancing glow upon a young man lying cradled in a thick bed of damp straw. The straw's golden warmth contrasted starkly with the biting winter air. Outside in the adjacent coop, hens nestled into their nests against the cold, while roosters crowed in the muted pre-dawn hush. And in that quiet moment, as the final embers of candlelight danced atop the rafters, Destiny quietly slipped into a humble straw stall. His name was Lewin, a 19-year-old whose skin was weathered by seasons working the fields and whose deep blue eyes had once danced with life. Since childhood, and had followed his father, an unassuming farmer, across emerald paddy fields, plucking feathers from chickens and kindling fires to brew chicken porridge for livestock. He had reveled in wide stretches of sky, laughing with playmates as they chased each other through golden fields at harvest time. Yet that morning, an unexpected fever had struck in the dead of night. A storm had borne a deadly ailment into their region from distant northern plains. The disease spread quickly, first to the cattle, then the villagers. And though young and robust, had collapsed under its weight. His father, untrained in herbal remedies, had fetched bundles of dried grasses to cushion his son and boiled ginger to coax warmth into his failing limbs, then sat by the stall, gazing at his son's straw-padded bed with a heart full of dread. Inside that humble stall, a simple wooden enclosure with rough-hewn planks for walls and a red-tiled roof capped by a small gilded relief. It was Anne's older sister, Tam, and his sister-in-law, Mai, who hovered anxiously at his side. Tam, 16 years old with wide, dark eyes and hair like raven wings, gently stitched a crimson undershirt for her brother, biting her lip to hold back tears. Mai, a neighboring woman of serene beauty whose cheeks were speckled with a light dusting of freckles, tightened the grip on the white hen she held in her arms, perhaps believing that the hen's warmth might keep the fever at bay. On the ridge of the roof above them, a golden carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood glowed as if it carried an unspoken blessing. lending the stall an almost sacred hush. Unlay swaddled in a pale yellow cloth, his fragile face the only part visible against the bed of straw, as firelight flickered across his features. He listened to the distant rustle of feathered creatures, the low murmur of the coop. Beside him, Tam whispered, Stay with us a little longer. I found fresh Gotu Kola leaves. Mom will boil them into a tonic. Your fever will break soon, I promise. And nodded weakly, too fever-stricken to offer more than a faint smile. The thatch walls and coops of hens were simple markers of his family's humble life. Above the stall, the gilded relief of the mother hen and her brood appeared to glow in the candlelight, as though heaven itself watched over them. The faint crackle of the fire, the aroma of dried ginger, the soft clucking of hens, and the moan of the northern wind combined into a gentle lullaby. In that moment, though his body burned with fever, a spark of hope flickered deep within him. His name was Lewin. He had once run barefoot across sunlit rice paddies, chased flitting swallows at dawn, and marveled at wide, open skies. Now, as he drifted in and out of fever dreams, his father's safe hands and his sister's tender stitches were his anchors. Perhaps, in the depths of his delirium, and sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Something that would alter the fate of his entire village. Chapter 2, Memories of Home. And stirred as if waking from a long journey. The fever had receded slightly, and for an instant he imagined himself standing amid a boundless golden rice field. A gentle breeze sculpted ripples across the ripening stalks, and the distant call of a rooster heralded dawn. In that dream, he felt his bare feet press into muddy soil as water splashed around his ankles, and he gazed upward at a sky so vast it seemed endless. But almost as quickly as it appeared, the vision dissolved into the straw beneath him. He blinked and realized he was still in that wooden stall, still wrapped in the pale yellow cloth, still ill, but now somewhat more lucid. By his side, Tam adjusted his sash, smoothing out folds of cloth. She whispered, Are you awake? The rooster crowed twice. Day is breaking. Drink this ginger brew. It'll help break the fever. He tried to lift his head to look at her, but only managed a faint nod. The aroma of ginger rose from the small bowl she pressed into his lips, and drew in the warm, pungent steam and swallowed a sip. It slid through his throat, kindling something like warmth in his veins. Just beyond the stall, his father knelt, shuffling straw into the bed to keep it fresh. The coop's hen shifted restlessly, as if sensing his awakening, and heard the low rumble of his father's voice, just a soft murmur, pleading for his son's quick recovery, and sank back into the straw, feeling a current of relief and gratitude wash over him. Tam dabbed a cool cloth to his brow. You scared us all, and she whispered, her voice trembling. But I think you'll be well soon, and managed a weak smile. Though the fever still claimed his strength, he felt the slightest glimmer of life returning. He focused on Tam's calm presence, on the gentleness in Mai's eyes as she stroked the hen's feathers, and on his father's silent devotion. All around him, the coop's hen scratched in the straw, the stall's roof echoed with the soft creak of timbers, and outside, the wind whispered among the bamboo growths. And wants to get up, he croaked at last, his voice raspy from fever. I want to stand outside, breathe fresh air. Tam glanced at Mai, then gently propped his shoulders. Let me help you sit, but you must rest before you wander too far. Mai struck a match at the corner of the wooden lantern on the wall. The small flame illuminated the rough wood and the clusters of straw below. She offered him the crimson undershirt, which Tam had sewn. Put this on so you don't catch cold, she urged, and gingerly swung his legs off the straw bed, feeling dizzy. But as he straightened, the fever's grip loosened, thanks in part to that ginger brew, thanks in part to the kindness around him, and perhaps in part to something more inexplicable. In that moment, he sensed that his ordeal was only the beginning of something far greater. Chapter 3, The Rooster's Cry and Fear's Arrival. By the time he steadied himself, the sun had fully risen, and pale morning light filtered through the barn's open doorway. The hens scattered at his feet, clucking in greeting. Tam and Mai led him outside, where his father waited just beyond the coop. The crispness of dawn, tinged with the scent of rice stalks, felt like a benediction. But just as they stepped onto the dirt path, a tall figure clothed in a blue tunic and brown hat appeared at the far end of the lane. It was Lon Van, the village chief who oversaw grain stores and safeguarded the community. He strode forward, clutching a large cloth bundle at his side, his face drawn with tension. Brother Tran, Lon Van greeted his father. I bring troubling news. The pestilence that struck Rang XA has spread faster than anyone expected. They've already buried 30 households there. People are fleeing in panic. We must reinforce the levee and prepare rice supplies. If the disease crosses this river, it will reach our own families. And's father's face turned grave. Has it already reached Rang Exe? That's just across the river. I thought we were safe. Lon Van shook his head. Some say it's not a typical contagion. Whomever it touches withers in a single night. They've been burying entire families alive. That's why I came early to warn you. We need to strengthen our defenses. And's mother, who had joined them, gasped in fear. But I cannot abandon my son. He's just growing stronger from his fever. I bedded him on straw to keep him warm. I cannot bear to see him leave. Lon Van placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You must protect him here. He's still too weak to travel. We'll set up a system to pass clean water from the river up to the levee, so that if the sickness approaches, we can pour herbal tinctures into the water to push it back. We're fortunate that it survived. His recovery is a miracle. He must stay here. Tam lowered her gaze and spoke softly. Chief, I will care for my brother. You have our word. If anything happens, we'll rely on the neighbors for help. Lon Van nodded, though his face remained clouded with worry. I understand. Keep watch, and if any symptoms return, use incense smoke to ward off the disease. That is the old remedy we have for plague. With that, Lon Van turned and walked off, leaving the family standing at the edge of their yard. And's mother hugged him fiercely, her heart pounding. Son, you must stay strong. We cannot let the sickness return. And nodded. Inside, he felt determined. Though his body had been ravaged by fever, his spirit burned with a stubborn warmth. He vowed that no matter how fierce the plague became, he would stand firm. Chapter 4. A community united by hope. Over the next few days, the villagers gathered at the riverside, just beyond the field where And's family's cottage stood. The river flowed gently, its surface a ribbon of blue-green light. People formed a long human chain, passing wooden buckets from one to the next. From the riverbank up to the levee on the hillside, each bucket, full of fresh water, was swiftly relayed along the line. The goal was to have a ready supply of water to pour down atop the levee as a barricade of liquid, mixed with herbal decoctions, to keep the pestilence from crossing over. From time to time, one of the men at the water's edge would raise his arms and call out, "Hurry! Let no bucket touch the ground. Pass it quickly." Then the bucket would arc through the air to the next person, who would catch it with practiced ease. Soon it reached the top of the levee, where the captain of the watch and a handful of volunteers mixed in bundles of dried mugwort and ginger, splashing the healing brew across the muddy embankment. Amid this rhythmic clatter, buckets colliding, water sloshing, calls of left foot, right foot, and watched from the safety of his home. He remained unsteady on his feet, shivering from weakness, but his heart surged with pride to see every man, woman, and child pulling together. Even the small children, barefoot and wide-eyed, took turns passing the buckets. Roosters crowed in the nearby barns as if heralding their collective effort. Tam hovered by the door of the stall, throat tight with emotion. "Brother, look how everyone's helping," she whispered, and nodded, voice hoarse. "They're protecting the village, just like we prayed. It feels like our hearts are one." Mai, who had returned from gathering more medicinal herbs, knelt beside it. "Drink this tonic," she urged, handing him a steaming bowl of boiled ginger and dandelion. "It will give you strength." And sipped the hot liquid. The zing of ginger cut through his foggy mind, and for the first time in days, he felt warmth radiate from his chest. He watched as his neighbors passed cycle after cycle of water, their faces lit with determination. In that moment, he understood that the village's salvation did not come from one person alone, but from every individual's willingness to unite. Lon Van, the village chief, strode along the levee, directing each shift at the watch post. As he passed, he cupped his hands to his ears. "Your survival gave us hope. When I saw you begin to recover, I realized we might have a chance. Keep listening to your heart, my friend," and felt a surge of gratitude course through him. He lifted his voice and called out to the workforce. "Everyone, remember this night. We will conquer the darkness together." From the water-bearers to the forge-wielding blacksmiths, from the weavers with their tiny thimbles to the elders chanting prayers by straw braziers, every villager responded with shouts of encouragement. "Together we stand. Together we prevail." That evening, as the sky darkened and stars flickered above, the levee was fortified. A final layer of water infused with fragrant herbs glistened under torchlight. Safe for the moment, and returned to the straw stall, where Tam and Mai waited with steaming broth. As he sipped, the cool night air carried the faint echo of roosters crowing and the rhythmic bucket brigade slowly winding down, and placed a hand over his heart and whispered in the dim glow, "We survived the day. We will survive tomorrow too." Chapter 5. The the legend of the striped garment. Though his strength continued to return and remained preoccupied by a single question: why had he been the one to survive? What had protected him when so many others had perished? Each time he looked at the pale yellow cloth wrapped around him, he thought about the pastel-striped tunic he wore during his fevered dreams, a garment woven with alternating pink and light blue threads. Those dream visions persisted. He would stand beneath roosters' cries in sunlit rice fields, that striped tunic billowing in a silent wind. Each time, he felt as though that piece of cloth was infused with a power beyond ordinary fabric. One early morning, Lanvin returned to his stall, still wearing his weathered blue tunic and well-worn hat. He held in his hands a set of tattered documents, the village's archival records. These parchments belonged to the old weaving cooperative once based in Rang Xe, Lanvin explained. Before the Great Plague that decimated Rang Xe years ago, there was a master weaver who was said to worship the roosters that guarded the barnyard. Legend said his cloth held a fragment of royal thread imbued with protective blessings so potent that a single stripe of it could ward off disease. When the plague first arrived, cursed fate caught him unprepared. He took one bolt of cloth and fled into the mountains, never to be seen again. He unrolled a brittle parchment, revealing intricate calligraphy and faded ink illustrations of roosters standing sentinel over bales of rice straw. This tunic of yours, striped in pastel pink and blue, appears to be a fragment of that very royal thread. Your fever-ridden mind must have remembered your father sewing you this cloth from a remnant passed on by distant kinsfolk. That cloth is more than just a keepsake. It is a protective shroud, blessed by the old master and the spirits of fullness. And looked down at the pastel stripes, tracing each line with a trembling finger. His heart thudded at the knowledge that his life had been preserved not by chance, but by a lineage of weaving tradition that had survived beyond Rang Xe's downfall. That's astounding, and muttered. But how did my father come by that cloth? Lanvin closed the scroll. Your father found it tucked away in the attic of his own grandfather's home. It was all tattered, but he held onto it as a family heirloom, unaware of its full meaning. When he sewed those stripes for you, it became part of your destiny. That's why, when you lay there in the straw, you awakened with the strength to resist death's knell, and felt tears well in his eyes, a mix of relief and awe. He pressed the cloth to his chest as though it were the most precious treasure. I will never take this tunic for granted again, he vowed. Lanvin's gaze softened. Neither should you, but do not rely on it alone. The villagers, working together, created a shield of water, incense, and herbal remedies that kept the plague at bay. The cloth gave you a head start, but the whole community's spirit sealed our safety, and stood, resolute. From now on, I will dedicate myself to both preserving the weaving tradition and to ensuring the well-being of everyone here. Chapter 6. A pilgrimage to Rang Xe's abandoned halls. With his constitution fully restored, and Lanvin resolved to revisit Rang Xe, a place once prosperous with looms and dye vats, now lying desolate after the plague. They prepared a small cart loaded with rice and herbal supplies to share with any survivors they might find, along with carefully folded cloth embroidered with pastel stripes as a gift of goodwill. They traveled along the winding riverside roads at dawn, with the cart's wooden wheels clattering on mossy stones. The air was crisp, enlivened by birdsong and the spicy tang of fresh bamboo shoots. The memory of his earlier fevered dreams flickered in Anne's mind each time he glimpsed a rooster's silhouette against the breaking dawn. By mid-morning, they reached Rang Xe's outskirts. A rusted gate, half-caved, creaked as they passed under it. Once, this gate had welcomed merchants and travelers. Now its hinges hung askew. They followed the cracked flagstone path leading to a collapsed barn with a half-intact red tile roof. The golden rooster relief that once crowned the ridge had fallen, leaving only a battered stump of gilded metal. From somewhere within the ruins drifted the faint echo of crows cawing overhead. Lanvin narrowed his eyes. This used to be the center of weaving. Thy pots would sit along that wall. We need to find the old sanctum of the master weaver. Some say it's beneath the central hall, but no one dares explore it. Cautiously, the two crept deeper, stepping around broken timbers and shattered pottery. Dust motes danced in beams of sunlight filtering through holes in the roof. Vines and ferns claimed each surface, their roots creeping between flagstones. In the center of what had once been a grand courtyard, a single weaving loom lay half covered in dust, its shuttle rotted away. Next to it, a faded mural depicted a master weaver sitting cross-legged among glowing roosters, holding a bolt of striped cloth in his lap. The pastel pink and blue threads once bright had faded to ghostly pastel gray, but the pattern was unmistakable. And approached the mural, heart pounding. He gently laid a hand against the image of the master weaver. This was him, he breathed. The one who blessed the cloth. Lon Van looked around uneasily. Legend says an illness overtook him within that very hall. Many of the villagers perished here. Some claim his spirit still walks these halls, guarding the secrets of his craft. And steeled himself, remembering the rituals he had undergone, the 7 sacred rites. He knelt before the remains of the loom and closed his eyes. Folding his hands in prayer, he recited the old invocation from memory. By rooster's vigilance and straw's embrace, bestow your blessing, hold me in grace. A gust of wind stirred through the shattered windows, causing the ivy to clap softly against the wall, and felt a warm, humming current at his fingertips. He opened his eyes to see faint, swirling motes of golden dust gathering above the loom. The dust glowed for a heartbeat, then vanished as the rafters moaned. Lon Van laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He has recognized you. The master weaver's spirit welcomes you. Together, they descended a narrow stairway hidden behind a collapsed stone slab. The air grew clammy, tinged with a sweet, moldy scent. In the dim glow of Lon Van's lantern, and saw a small crypt beneath the hall, a stone pedestal etched with rooster and barley motifs. At its center lay a rusted chest, sealed by a wrought iron lock. Within that chest lies the Codex of Textiles, Lon Van whispered. Legends say it contains formulas for dye, weaving patterns, and prayers of protection. If we can restore its contents, we might help villages far beyond ours. Anne's pulse quickened, but the lock is rusted shut. How do we open it? Lon Van produced a slender iron key that had once belonged to Rang Xas village treasurer. This key was passed down to me by my grandfather. He survived the plague and vowed to preserve these secrets for someone worthy. With a trembling hand, Lon Van slid the key into the lock. It turned with a grinding click. The lid creaked open, revealing a single scroll of parchment bound in leather, embossed with pastel stripes barely visible through grime. Carefully, and unrolled it. The Codex's pages contain detailed diagrams of weaving looms, step-by-step instructions for combining pastel pink and blue threads in precise patterns, as well as prayers to be woven into each bolt for protection. Marginal notes in a delicate hand read, "Wear this for your neighbor. Let this cloth guard your village. May the roosters guide your heart." Anne's voice shook as he read. By crafting this cloth, one bonds body and spirit to the living rooster's vigilance, straw's embrace. The plague finds no purchase. Lon Van watched tears form in his eyes. Now we understand. The master weaver wove his faith into every thread, binding healing into the fabric itself. That tunic you wore, and it contained those prayers, those diagrams, those lines of power, and folded the scroll carefully, placing it in his chest. We must bring these instructions back to Ton Hoa, replicate the pattern, and distribute the cloth to neighboring villages. Lon Van nodded. At dawn, we depart. Today, we'll rest in the old caretaker's cottage, then begin our return journey. As they rose from the crypt, the rustle of ghostly roosters echoed in the silence, like a final benediction from a departed master. Chapter 7. Return to Ton Hoa. At first light, and then Lon Van retraced their steps across the misty fields toward their home village. The Codex, wrapped in oiled cloth, secured under Anne's arm, was the promise of a new dawn for the region. The countryside was hushed, aside from the soft coo of doves in the steeple of a distant chapel and the faint chirp of sparrows at the weaving cottage they passed. Back at the riverside levee, villagers were already lining up again, but not to pass buckets this time. Instead, they gathered around simple cotton frames and dye vats, and unrolled the Codex on a wooden crate, passing out freshly woven skeins of pastel threads in pink and blue. The village's new apprentice weavers, eager youth who had never dared venture into weaving before, inhaled sharply at the sight of these precious, sacred threads. Tam and I stood nearby, offering herbal tea to anyone who came for a closer look. Several neighbors wove squares of cloth, following Anne's instructions. Weave one pastel stripe of pink, then two of blue, repeating. Each stripe must be 5 finger breadths wide. Keep your heart calm. Let the roosters in your mind watch over the warp. Little by little, pastel cloth began to bloom across wooden looms. Bolts of pastel herringbone pattern, pastel pinstripe pattern, pastel crosshatch pattern. The air was thick with the tang of dye, crushed indigo for blue, crushed madder root for pink. As each piece of cloth emerged damp, villagers laid them to dry on bamboo racks facing the sun, and walked along the line, encouraging each weaver, hold the thread wholeheartedly. Let your prayers infuse it. This is more than fabric. This is hope woven into every fiber. When the first bolts of cloth dried to a soft pastel glow, and gathered them and beckoned the villagers to form another human chain, this time passing bundles of viewing cloth instead of buckets of water, they distributed the protective cloth across 4 neighboring villages: Vong Lai Lan, Tui Sun, Sunjia, and ultimately back to Rang Exe. Wherever the pastel cloth was draped over door frames, hung in doorways, or stitched into garments, the villagers reported feeling a sudden calm in their hearts, as if a watchful hen had taken flight above them, glimmering in golden light. As night fell, not a single new case of disease arose in any of the villages that wore the pastel cloth. Word of this miracle spread like wildfire throughout the region. Back in Tan Hoa, at the square before the old barn, the entire village held a festival at dusk. Bamboo torches cast a flickering glow on the throng, and stood on a simple raised platform, wearing his cherished pastel-striped tunic. The codex sat on a small wooden altar behind him. He addressed the gathered crowd. "My friends, today we celebrate not only the end of disease, but the power of unity and faith. When our neighbors in Rang Exe fell into despair, this cloth, woven with the Master's prayers, gave us a path forward. Let its pastel stripes remind us that even in the harshest winter, we can weave hope and protection through our communities. I am grateful to share this blessing with every household here." As his words settled over the crowd, the villagers cheered and lit more torches, pressing pastel cloths to their hearts in solemn gratitude. Overhead, roosters crowed from coops nearby in a chorus as if paying homage to the master weaver's legacy. Tam and Mai stood at his side, faces bright with pride. Their mother wiped tears from her cheeks as she handed out steaming bowls of chicken porridge to anyone still hungry. And's father, with a gentle smile, patted his son's shoulder. "You have honored our family's humble roots," he said. "Your courage carried the flame of hope through our darkest days." And's gratitude swelled. Beneath the glow of torchlight, he bowed deeply in front of the altar. To every sister and brother who passed a basket of water, every mother and father who donated herbs, and every child who held a pastel thread, you are the true guardians of our village. May we never forget this bond. Chapter 8: A New Dawn for the Weavers. In the weeks that followed, the so-called Pastel Weaving Guild sprang to life in Tan Hoa and neighboring hamlets. Villagers who had never touched a loom formed apprentice groups. Elder weavers, some who had fled Rang Exe, returned to teach the ancient craft, weaving protective patterns into every garment they created, and served as guild master, his role less a position of power than a guardian of knowledge. He ensured that all families received a modest supply of pastel cloth so that no household would remain unprotected. One sunny morning, a group of school children, aged 7 to 12, gathered at the guild hall, an open-air pavilion draped in pastel banners, and stood patiently as each child placed a single straw of pastel thread into their spindle for spinning. A boy named Min turned to him with wide eyes. "Surin, do you think the pastel stripes will protect me if I get sick?" And smiled and knelt to Min's level. "These stripes carry the prayers of our ancestors, the faith of our neighbors, and the courage of farmers who shared water along a levee. Yes, they will protect you, as long as you remember to weave your own hope into them." The boy nodded solemnly and returned to his spinning wheel. All around them, children wove bolts of pastel fabric that fluttered in the spring breeze. The guild hall soon brimmed with bolts of cloth in pastel pink and blue patterns, each piece a living testament to the community's faith and resilience. Tam, who had become the guild's head scribe, recorded every pattern and prayer verse in a new illuminated codex. She sketched roosters, ripe straw sheaves, and stylized rice grains in gold leaf margins, ensuring that future generations would benefit from this knowledge. Mai, now a respected herbalist, opened a small apothecary at the edge of the guild hall. She specialized in potions and salves made from the region's medicinal plants, ginger, dandelion, mugwort. And from that day forward, she began stitching tiny pastel symbols into each jar's label, symbolizing protection. And's mother tended her own modest weaving loom in the corner of the family's modest home, weaving pastel cloth into strips that she then sold at the market for a handful of coins. These coins, traded for rice and salt, helped fund the guild's expansion. She would often pause in her weaving, gaze out at the sunrise, and say a silent prayer of thanks for her son's safe return from fever. His father joined the guild as its first apprentice blacksmith. Though he had always worked the fields, he now hammered simple loom parts, shuttles, heddles, and heddle rods from wrought iron. His steady, rhythmic hammering rang through the courtyard as he forged each piece, knowing that each iron rod he crafted would help someone's weaving stand strong through many seasons. Between the walls of the guild hall, and prepared lesson plans for aspiring weavers. Each evening, as the sky turned tangerine, he would gather everyone for a demonstration: how to weave the standard pastel-striped pattern, how to adjust tension on the warp threads, how to mix crushed indigo and madder root dyes to achieve the perfect pastel hues. His voice would rise and fall in gentle cadences. Place one pink thread, then two blue threads. Adjust your shuttle so that it oscillates smoothly. Keep your wrist relaxed, and imagine the rooster's call guiding your hand. Let your breath follow the rhythm of your loom. So did the pastel weaving guild thrive. Soon, pillows and shawls woven in pastel patterns began to appear along the dusty paths of other villages. Travelers who once feared leaving their homes now wore pastel-dyed scarves as talismans. Parents tucked pastel patches into their children's collars as they headed off to school. The memory of the plague lingered, but the threat seemed to recede whenever villagers wove or touched those pastel threads.